Senators beat the Blues by a score of 8-1.
They were done with that. Thought they had got that out of their system with Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brayden Kiley. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. A terrible, terrible performance last night for the St. Louis Blues in Ottawa.
All right,
Alex,
it wasn't that.
Oh, no, it was. Every adjective that I could use to describe that one, it actually feels like it was even worse.
Before Holloway scored the goal, Kerbs was going back through to find out the last time the Blues were shut out 7-0, and he was like, well, I think I found it. It was in the 80s. And then Dylan Holloway scored, and he goes, well, don't need that one anymore.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. That's what that performance was last night. And I thought they had gotten that out of their system. I didn't think this team was going to have that in them. They didn't play well against Minnesota a couple of weeks ago. But other than that, for the most part this year, they've at least been in every game going into the third period. Not last night, man. I don't know about you guys, but I decided to go watch the baseball game instead by the third period. Just full disclosure, didn't see the third period. Didn't watch it. Didn't feel like I was missing anything. And I got to tell you, looking at the final score, I don't think I missed anything.
Were you surprised that they weren't shut out, though? You didn't see the goal, man.
I was more surprised they didn't give up 10 goals, because that's what I thought they were going to do.
They were pretty close to it.
So the worst thing that you can be called as a professional athlete is soft. And Brayden Schenn didn't mince words after that game last night.
Soft in the battles and soft kind of all over the ice, and competitive level wasn't there, and turned over pucks, and before you know it, that's the score. But that's kind of 2 games in a row now, right? Where that's 13 goals by not playing the right way, and so that we got to fix that internally and fast and finish this road trip off the right way.
I like how you said only a professional athlete. That's the worst thing to be called. Not like somebody walked up to me at the grocery store like, "Hey, Ferrario, you're soft."
Oh,
thanks, man.
If people called me soft, I would understand. That's correct. But if you're calling a professional athlete soft, it's probably not a good thing, especially when your peers are calling you soft.
Yeah.
Remember the brouhaha that was caused by Gerard Mayo last week calling his Patriots team soft? Everybody in the media came out and said, "Oh, I can't do that."
The players were
can't do that.
Yeah, we were soft.
Brayden Schenn just acknowledged, we've been soft over the last couple of games. Played against Montreal, didn't have our best game. Played against Ottawa, got embarrassed. Alex, what's going on with this team?
I mean, they're exactly what Brayden Schenn said. And it's not just the soft word, it's how he described it. You're losing puck battles. You're not fighting for puck possession. That game just got worse as it went along because you started the game off by just making dumb mistakes. Like the first goal that Ottawa scored. You try and make a pass through 5 different players and it comes the other way. The second one that scored, you overskate a puck in the offensive zone. The third one, you make a pass behind the player. It's an odd man rush the other way. That wasn't soft. That was just dumb mistakes. The second period was when probably Brayden Schenn's talking about on back-to-back penalty kills. You just let Ottawa pass the puck around. There was no aggressiveness towards loose pucks. There was no trying to put pressure on players to create turnovers. It was, we'll see what happens in this spot. It felt like a game where the Blues went into it with the mindset of we don't stand a chance. Maybe it's because of the Matthew Joseph loss. Maybe it's because you look at it and the team's sitting like, hey, we got back-to-back injuries, 2 impactful players. How do we come back from this one? But zone entries are about as easy as you can ask in these last 2 games against St. Louis. I mean, Montreal and Ottawa have just been basically given the green light. Step in and see what happens. And then there's no retrieval of pucks in the offensive zone. You've gone east to west once again. There's no offensive zone setup. And when you watch the way Matthew Joseph plays, it felt like the Blues kind of took on that identity. And when Matthew Joseph left, they're back to playing this rush style of hockey. But there's no other way to describe it than what Brayden Schenn said. You're not winning puck battles. You're not creating offensive zone time. You're just kind of sitting back and letting Ottawa do what they want to you.
Yeah, and last night, once you go down 3-0, I mean, that's a theme, is slow starts for this team. But then business decisions were made. We're not going to go in. We're not going to go and play the grinded-out style of hockey that you need to do to come back and try and win that game. We're not going to get it on the forecheck. We're not going to step up at the blue line and hit guys. It's business decisions. That game was lost in the first period, and so you just kind of coast through the final 40 minutes. That's what happened last night. And the Montreal game, I can't really explain because they did have some of that fight back in them. I'm not shocked by the result.
I know that the result looked bad against Montreal. They didn't play really well, but that wasn't a game that I left thinking like, oh, no.
No,
they're done.
The beginning of the end.
It's game over. But this game against Ottawa, a lot of the things, it's political season, right? One of the worst things that you can do as a candidate is confirm all of the fears that people have about you. And that's how I feel about the Blues right now. Watching that game last night confirmed a lot of the fears that I think a lot of people had about the team coming into this season. The forward just had no way to not just generate offense, but to sustain any time in the offensive zone. The turnovers have been a huge problem for this team all year long. Getting through the neutral zone for this team is like me playing Frogger back in the day. Like, maybe you'll get to the other side.
He looks concerned.
No, I know.
There's no guarantee. You might get splatted by a car going across the road. That's what the Blues look like as they're trying to go through the neutral zone. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't appear to be this hard for other teams, but for the Blues, it's tough, man. So it's like me trying to say party in a live read. Good luck. It's not going to go well.
Talk about success.
Exactly. I don't know if these are fixable problems. And that's my fear. That's my frustration as I watched last night is how much of this can they mask over? How much of it, as Drew Bannister was talking about it last night, he said, we got to be better as a coaching staff. We got to be better as a team. Cool, you can do that. How much of this is actually fixable, though, versus how much of this is just, hey, you don't have the personnel to be able to do some of the things that they want to do. Well, I don't know.
They do have the personnel. You did it against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that's the part.
But you can do anything one time. You got to be consistent.
But you've got the personnel that can do it.
Do you? Like, when we're saying what are you referencing?
You got the personnel that can play to the style you're talking about. Do you have the personnel that's willing to play to the style that you're talking about? Because that's the question right now. You've seen it against the...
We're talking about like playing a tough, hard-nosed, grinded-out style of hockey.
You absolutely wiped away the Toronto Maple Leafs in that game.
I don't think they got the core to play that style. Because how many years is this now that we've been having this conversation on these airwaves of a game or multiple games? This is the first game this season. I wouldn't be shocked if we have this conversation in a couple weeks again. But with this core of St. Louis Blues players, this isn't the first time we've had this conversation. Berube was yelling about this from the clouds for, the last year and a half that he was here? This is year 3 in which we're having the same conversation of there's not enough compete, they're not going in, they're not going to the boards, they're not trying to ground out the style of hockey.
But welcome to why this team is so infuriating for people. Because, again, you've got the personnel that can do it. We've seen them play that style and be successful with it. They're unwilling to do it on a nightly basis, and that's the difference right now.
I mean, sometimes unwilling becomes unable.
Yeah.
Like, to me, my concern, Alex, and I think we're saying the same things but coming to different conclusions about it, you're right. They're unable or unwilling to do it every single night, and I lean more on they're unable to do it every single night. I'm not sure that, and it's not about a talent thing, I'm just not sure it fits their style of play. Like Alexander Texier, I don't think he's a guy that's really going to be a grinded out kind of a player. I don't think Booch at center is that guy. I think he's more of it when he's playing on the wing, but I don't think at center he's that guy. Kyra's just never going to be that player. We just have to acknowledge it, understand it. I think he's actually had a more well-rounded game this season, but he's not scoring goals, and ultimately that's what he's going to be judged on. Brandon Saad's not that guy. I don't think Schenn at this point in his career is necessarily that guy. I don't think he can sustain offensive zone time the way that he once did. I like Holloway. I like Zach Bolduc, but he's still really young. I like Jake Neighbors. I liked Matthew Joseph, but he's not in the lineup right now. And now you don't even have Kasperi Kapanen potentially for a little while in the lineup. I just don't know that this is a group of players that when you bring it together, it's going to be able to play that style consistently. There will be nights where it looks really good. I wouldn't even be shocked if in their next game they have a little bit of a rebound, they play better against Philadelphia. But I do think there will be the rubber band effect where it ends up coming back down to earth. And that is ultimately where I come down on this. As I said before the season, I think they could be a better team, but take a step back in terms of the overall standings by the end of the season. It's kind of how I'm feeling today.
Yeah.
I feel today like our read on the team coming into the season, T-Bone, I still feel the same way about them. They're okay. They're taking steps in the right direction, and they've added pieces to the core, which is ultimately what this year is going to be all about. But the end results, I don't know that they're going to be a great team this year.
Yeah, I think they've got complementary pieces that can play that for a while, or play that style. I think last night was very obvious what their issue is, and frankly, the Montreal Canadiens game was as well. Like, your issue is the guys that are supposed to be leading you into fight, leading you into battle. They're not capable of doing it right now. And to what you guys are saying, might be the biggest problem for this team, to where you don't have the top players that can drag you into the fight. Because last night, again, the first 3 goals that Ottawa scored, Buchnevich turned the puck over, Schenn and Saad turned the puck over, and Jake Neighbors turned the puck over. Yep. Those are the guys that are getting paid $8 million, $6.5 million to go out there and play when Robert Thomas and Matthew Joseph disappear. and they made the mistakes that led to odd man rushes, and your team is down in that situation. The Matthew Josephs, the Dylan Holloways, the Jake Neighbors, I think those are guys that actually can play to this style, and they're showcasing it by both being tied for the team lead in goals. I think your defense overall has improved to the point that they can keep you in games from start to finish. But it doesn't matter how good your defense looks or how good you think your goaltending is when you're dealing with odd man rushes every single shift that your top players are on the ice. Your bench is expecting the first line and the second line to jump over the boards and go out there and create zone time, create opportunities in the offensive zone to set your team up for better opportunities. Last night, Drew Bannister started Sundqvist, Fox, and Toropchenko. Out of the gate, they won the faceoff. They took it into the zone, cycled it for 30 seconds. What happened? Buchnevich line jumped over the boards. Buch passes the puck into the middle of the ice. 3-on-1 the other way.
Agreed. And I think what we're seeing is the result of them not being the team that is a legit threat. And what I mean by that is Pavel Buchnevich is not a top six center. He's just not. He's a top six winger, but he's not a top six center.
Thank you.
But he's being asked to play that way because he has to. Who else are you going to put at center right now? Brayden Schenn, not a top six center. I'm not even sure he's a top six forward right now with the way that he's been playing so far this year. Jordan Kyrou, not a top line forward. Second line forward, not a top line forward. Jake Neighbors, in the right spot right now as a second line forward. Brandon Saad, at this point in his career, probably not a top six winger. Alexander Texier, definitely not a top six winger. You have too many guys right now in your top six that should not be playing in the top six. Matthew Joseph's a great third-line player. Same thing for Holloway, same thing for Bolduc. But your top six right now just isn't up to snuff with the best teams in the league. So, yes, you're right, Alex. Your top line going out there not performing the way that you need them to. Some of that is Buch not being at the right spot. Some of that is Kyrou not living up to the billing of the goal scoring. He hasn't scored in, 9 games now?
Yeah, since game 1 of the regular season.
Brayden Schenn hasn't scored since game 3.
Buchnevich hasn't scored since game 3.
Boom, there you go. Ultimately, it comes back to those three guys. They're not getting on the score sheet with goals, and until that changes, this team ain't going to be what we wanted it to be. I do think, and it sounds really negative right now because that game last night sucked, I think this team is more fun to watch than they have been in recent seasons. That game was not. But overall, when Matthew Joseph is out there, when he's doing his thing, I think he brings a lot to the table and it changes things. When Robert Thomas is out there, I think that's going to make it look a lot better from the center perspective. But overall, this team it's still quite a few pieces away. That's why you're in the midst of a retool and you're not trying to really push your chips into the middle this season.
Yeah, I can't.
It's frustrating when you're in the midst of it, though, man. I get it.
It is, and I mean, I'm not going to back away from where I stand. I still believe this team can compete for a playoff spot, even despite these last 2 losses. These are going to happen for a team that retools. It's just a matter of going the ups and downs. But you've got pieces that have moved this in the right direction. I mean,
Agreed.
Philip Broberg has been great. Dylan Holloway tied for the team lead. You've got the young cast that's supposed to be taking this team over. We'll talk about this a little bit later. I think the problem right now for you is the guys that are supposed to be leading you into this fight of being contenders once again, they might be the problem.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. The 101 ESPN cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. You can always listen to us as well on the 101 ESPN app. It is free to download. You can check out the podcasts over there at any point over the course of the day. They are presented by Schaefer Door Company. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we're going to get into some NFL quick hitters, including a comment from the Colts. Man, this Anthony Richardson situation, at some point, I got to wonder if they're going to potentially trade him in the offseason. We'll talk about that in 15 minutes. But next, was that the last gasp for the Yankees, or do they have a little bit left in the tank to make this series interesting? We'll talk about it here on 101 ESPN.
Bases loaded, 2 out. Cranks the ball, deep left field. Volpe with redemption.
An 11-4 win last night for the New York Yankees, just as some of us here on this very show predicted with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. Alex, was that the last gasp for the Yankees? Is had to get one of them out of there? Or do you think they actually have a little something in themselves to make this interesting? They do have Garrett Cole on the mound tonight in Game 5, a game that you'll hear right here on 101 ESPN beginning at 6 o'clock.
I think you should be answering that question, BK Stradamus.
I do not think that they have enough left in the tank to make this really interesting. I do think Garrett Cole is the type of guy that can get us to a Game 6, though. Having Garrett Cole in this game could make things interesting. I still believe that the Dodgers will end up winning the series. Like, I don't think the Yankees have enough to push this to 7. I think they have enough potentially because of who's on the mound tonight. And Jack Flaherty, I just don't know what you're getting. It's the mystery box, right? It's he's a box of chocolates, and you don't really know what you're going to get any given time.
Thanks, Forrest.
Did you just quote Forrest Gump?
Sure did. I'm glad you understood the reference.
I'm surprised you understood the reference.
I don't know which Jack Flaherty we're going to get tonight. He has at times been great, at times underwhelming. I think Garrett Cole is going to have a really nice performance, though, against the Dodgers.
I was just going to say, I could say the same thing with Garrett Cole. I know Garrett Cole's been good in the postseason, but it's not like the Garrett Cole that's going out there and striking out 11 or 12.
He's been really good this postseason, man.
I just don't know which Garrett Cole you're going to get, though, against this Dodgers team. We've talked about it. And look, he pitched well against the Dodgers the last time. 6 innings, 1 earned run, 4 strikeouts. But it doesn't seem like that felt like everything the Yankees had in the tanks to get through this one. And the pitching side of it, I'm not really sure is going to be as impactful as who's got the most offense throughout the game.
Sure.
Because last night, I mean, the Yankees almost lost that game still. Now, like, they cleared away a little bit. They distanced themselves even when the Dodgers started to push back in. But that's where I feel like the last gasp is. Because they had a 4-run lead, and then it was a 2-run lead, and then they finally were able to break through and just kind of put the Dodgers away. Can you do that in back-to-back games? Can you go out there and have offense where your 7, 8, and 9 hole hitters are hitting 500 from the plate in a game against the Dodgers in back-to-back ones?
No, but you have to. Tonight needs to be a Soto Judge game. Like you need the top of the order.
Well, and that's why.
Agreed.
And that's why, because I haven't seen it with the Judge side of things. It's got to be a Soto Stanton type of game then.
I think the real concern, if you're a Yankees fan, and certainly none of us are in this room, but if you're a Yankees fan, my concern would be your bullpen's fried. You're going to ask these guys to throw 3 straight days. Basically, all of your high leverage relievers will have to go 3 straight days against this Dodgers lineup. And like Luke Weaver went, 3 innings last night? Good luck. It's not a good situation to be in for their bullpen. So you're going to be asking a lot. Like 7 innings is almost necessary tonight out of Garrett Cole to keep yourself feeling good about where your bullpen's going to be at. And even then, you're going to need a little bit more from your offense once again. And you need Soto and Judge to come through. Soto, Judge, Stanton. That's really where this lineup has been at its best during the regular season, not necessarily in the postseason. And if those guys don't hit at a high level tonight, I don't think they'll have enough. But that's the formula, and it's not outlandish to think that it could happen because those guys have come through before.
Yeah, I can't see them winning this game because of their pitching. And I typically have been on the side of, hey, look, great pitching shuts down great lineups. Not the Dodgers. We were talking about this in the office before the show. Man, their offense has been unbelievable in this postseason. Like 4 runs is a down day for them. Think of that for a moment. 4 runs is a down day. They've been just tearing the cover off of the baseball. And I think if you're the Yankees, the only way you're getting yourself back to L.A., if you're going to drag the Dodgers back to their home stadium, it's going to be you're going to have to hit the baseball. And I just don't know if their offense is capable of doing that. Look, their 7 through 9 hitters were great last night. To your point, Alex, that's not going to be the recipe for success. It's going to come down to Judge. And I haven't seen enough from Judge to believe that he's going to be the guy that can really get things going again. They're going to have to outslug the Dodgers if they want to get back to L.A., and I just don't think they can do that. I think you're going to see them. Yeah, I think that's how you're going to see the Dodgers end up just taking this, winning it with Jack Flaherty tonight, and boom, it's over 5 games. And you know what? The bullpen game was an odd game, but you know what? They're going to close it out tonight.
I mean, credit to the Yankees because that Freddie Freeman home run, that felt like it was the dagger, and I know it was the first inning, but it felt like a moment where it was like, Yankees got to be like, there's no bleeping way. Like, Freddie Freeman is doing something that nobody has done in baseball history with
what
home runs.
Man.
What is it, 6 straight World Series games he has hit a home run in? That's the moment that I do give the Yankees credit to fight back into that game, but that's why that gas tank's got to be on E right now, because that's a moment you don't come back from.
How about this stat for Freddie Freeman, speaking of him? This is from Sarah Langs. Freddie Freeman has 10 RBIs so far in this World Series. only players with more in a World Series since RBIs became official since 1920. 1960, Bobby Richardson had 12. 1960, Mickey Mantle had 11. That's it. That's the end of that list right there.
He is cementing his legacy as... Is he going to go down as the best first baseman of this era? Like post-Albert era, I should clarify here. Like the 2015 and beyond. So you got like Joey Votto, Paul Goldschmidt, Freddie Freeman, like that
put
era.
Votto in the Pujols era because I feel like he was in that same timeline.
Yeah. I feel like Pujols really began in like 01 though, and Votto was like 2010-ish. Am I right on that?
I think it was before that.
So wasn't he competing with him for some of those MVPs?
Yeah, but to your question,
Yeah, no, you're right. 2010 was when he won the MVP.
So his career began in earnest in 2008. So yeah. I think they're a little different in terms of the eras, but maybe not.
I think to your...
Pujols basically was done at first base by 2013.
I think to your question, I think the answer is probably going to be yes for Freddie Freeman, because even though Paul Goldschmidt was really good, and I think he's in this conversation, Freddie Freeman's a guy that, like, every year I can write down in pen, he's going to hit like 290, 300, get on base around like 400, slug 500. It's just that's what Freddie Freeman's going to do, and now he's got the postseason run to be with him. I mean, he's going to be the World Series MVP as long as the Dodgers close this thing out, which, again, I'd be shocked if they don't. His MVP season came in 2020, so he doesn't have a full season MVP, but he's got an MVP to his name. For Paul Goldschmidt, I mean, we saw the tail off for Goldie, and at some point it'll come for Freeman, I believe. But Goldschmidt was never a guy that you could always just say, okay, write in pen, you're going to get this exactly from him. Oh, and by the way, here's his big postseason moment. You don't have the big postseason moment for Goldschmidt. I think Freeman is this era's best first baseman.
Other guy you could throw in there is Miguel Cabrera. Miggy would probably be part of this conversation as well. I would still lean
I would put
Freddie Freeman. And Miggy, he goes back even further as well. He was almost more the Pujols era than the Freddie Freeman era.
I don't really think of this era as Miguel Cabrera. I think that is the back end of Miguel Cabrera. I think more third baseman / first baseman, Florida and Detroit before I think of him with the Freeman. He's in his own category, and it's because of this postseason. Because you probably could have put a couple of other guys with him, like we talked about yesterday, Goldschmidt with him prior to this postseason run. I don't think anybody touches Freddie Freeman now unless they have a moment like he's going to.
All right, we got one more thing that we got to get to from last night's game, because it was, in some ways, the story of the game, because the game got so lopsided. 11-4 victory for the Yankees again, forcing Game 5, which you'll hear right here on 101 ESPN tonight at 6 o'clock. Here's the play that everybody's going to be discussing this morning.
And yeah, Betts has that ball in his glove, and this fan literally tries to take his glove off. Pries the ball out of there. A for effort. Well, he won't be watching the game much longer.
That audio courtesy of Fox. So if you missed it last night, ball down the line, foul territory, Mookie Betts going to left field, stretches his arm out basically into the stands, but it's like right on the line, right on the cusp. And he finds a way to catch it, right? And the ball is in his glove, but as he has his arm outstretched over the wall, two Yankees fans, one in particular first, is reaching into his glove and like ripping it open to pull the ball out. The other guy next to him, I believe it was his brother, ends up helping him out a little bit to keep his arm up there. And you could see Mookie like start to jump almost to like bring himself back up, because he's trying to figure out what's going on. Why can't I bring my arm back down? They pull the ball out, Alex. They end up calling fan interference. If you're that guy's buddy, if you're sitting right next to him and you went to the game with this guy, this buffoon who ends up getting kicked out of the game, deservingly so, because
never go
he's
to a Yankees game again.
Donkey. What do you do?
I leave.
If you're his buddy and you're there with him,
I leave.
If it's your brother, is it a different thing?
No, I leave. Okay. I leave. I text him as I'm leaving and saying, you're an idiot, and I'm distancing myself from you. Like, there are some things that I know people are probably texting in right now saying, you never turn your back on a bro. If you're going to do something that stupid to where not just interfere in a World Series game, but literally grab the arm of Mookie Betts. There was a potential that Mookie could have sprained something. And you're going to do that in the middle of that game. I don't care, man. Yeah, we're done. Sorry. Even family. I know I'm the family guy. You turn your back on family on that one.
Yeah. Oh, I totally throw him under the bus. And go, that was him right there. Yep. And then he gets kicked out, and I'm sticking around in my seats to watch the World Series game.
Yeah,
a regular season game. Maybe I guys, this is a World Series, man. I'm sticking around. I'm throwing my brother, my sister, my dad, whoever it is, my best friend. He's getting thrown under the bus. They can escort him out. I'm sticking in my seats, and I'm catching the end of the game.
Just embarrassing. You look like an idiot up there.
So Jesse Rogers was able to catch up with this guy, Austin Capobianco, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. Yeah, exactly. Alex and I had the exact same reaction whenever we saw this.
Of course.
His friend John Peter was the guy that then grabbed the non-glove hand to keep him up. And he said...
So it was his friend? It wasn't his brother?
His friend. I apologize. It was not his brother. It was his friend. Capobianco, a season ticket holder, of course, said he knew that he would be in trouble, but chose to grab and open Betts' glove nonetheless, telling ESPN that, quote, he and Peter had often discussed this exact scenario. If a foul ball comes our way, we're going to do whatever we can to help the team. Quote, we always joke about the ball in our area. We're not going to go out of our way to attack, but if it's in our area, we're going to D up. Somebody defends, someone knocks the ball, we talk about it. We're willing to do it.
No. Ban the dude for life. That's absurd.
You didn't help the team.
This is obviously unacceptable. Obviously.
BK would so be the guy that would be celebrating next to the guy that was trying to grab the glove off of Mookie Betts.
He's a legend in New York, right? We can all agree.
No, he's a legend.
If this is one of your own, you kind of all come together with it.
No, I'd be saying the same thing if this was a Cardinals fan in a Cardinals World Series game.
Oh man, I think you gotta come together.
No,
right?
You're a dummy. You've been talking about interfering with a game your entire life.
I mean, come on.
And they didn't just try and rip the ball out.
It's also perfect for the Yankees.
It was such a whiff on both ends. A, you didn't help the team because it ended up being an out.
Yeah.
And B, you didn't even get the freaking ball because it fell back into the field of play.
And you weren't trying to rip the ball out. You literally grabbed the other hand of Mookie Betts and said, no.
Again, understanding up front, this is unacceptable. It shouldn't happen. It's not.
I hate
it's
this
not
kind
something
of stuff.
I'm capable of doing because I'm too much of a wimp, honestly.
BK would totally turn his back on the ball. Baseball.
100%. That would be me. However, if the guy next to me did this and it was somebody that I came to the game with and is a good friend of mine, I probably would have celebrated it. I would have got lost in the moment, and I would have been excited about what had just taken place. And
that's absurd.
Shame on you.
Also, I feel bad for that guy because, like, the face he was making, he was, like, tucking his face in. It's like, man, for like, the entirety of your life, that's going to be the face that people will remember, and that is not a good look.
I kind of loved it.
Of course you would.
I thought it was perfect for who Yankees fans are, what they represent, what they're all about. It just fit. It's like Philly fans. Philly fans are an angry mob at every game that they've ever been to. And if something like this happens with a Phillies fan, it's just to be expected almost. I don't know. Nothing happened last night that was bad. If Mookie gets hurt on that play, and obviously that is a potential consequence of doing something like that. It's why it can't happen. But nothing happened. Mookie was fine. Everybody ended up going their separate ways. It just ended up being a funny moment that we got out of the World Series. I kind of liked it.
No. You're just as much of a jerk as that guy. Come on, man.
That's fair.
You got to be better than that.
I'll accept it. Coming up next, NFL Quick Hitters here on BK and Ferrario.
Tanner Hendrickson here at the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues lose to the Senators last night 8-1. They are off today. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they visit the Philadelphia Flyers. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then puck drop at 6 with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, Game 5 of the World Series as the Dodgers look to close out the Yankees. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, it's time for some NFL quick hitters with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. That is coming up in 10 minutes. But right now, Alex, as of today, who would you consider to be the most disappointing team in the NFL? Who's the team that's disappointed you the most so far?
Oh, man. Probably the Jets. Now, it's not disappointing me because I'm actually kind of liking the disaster that they are. But in terms of expectations, everybody was telling me that the Jets were going to be competing for the top spot in the AFC East, and now they're competing for the top pick in the draft. Yeah. So I would say that they have to be at the top of the list with a couple of others pretty close to them.
T-Bone?
I think I would go with, there's two in mind for me. The Jets was one of them, but I think I'm going to lean towards the Dallas Cowboys.
That was my other one.
Because the Cowboys, I still think they've got a bunch of talent on their roster. Look, they're dealing with some injuries defensively. They shouldn't be getting blown out at home like they have. They're 0-3 at home. They've lost by an unbelievable margin when they are at home. And everything just feels off. You know, Dak doesn't look the same. CeeDee Lamb hasn't felt like the same, like, number one alpha wide receiver as we were expecting. They're probably the most disappointing team. I considered Miami. They were the other team I thought of.
All right, can we relax? Can you leave one for
Come on. Be creative and come up with another one.
Cincinnati can't be yours, man, because you think they're going to win the rest of the season.
That's not who I was talking about. Miami was going to be my other team that I was going to go with because they look like a terrible football team, man. You lost this week against Arizona at home in the return to Tua Tagovailoa. I don't know what has happened to the Miami Dolphins. Their defense has actually been, for the most part, okay this season. The defense hasn't been the problem. It's the offense. And I understand when Tua is out for 3 weeks, Huntley isn't great. He's not going to be able to get the ball to Waddle or Tyreek the same way that Tua can. But even this week, the offense it didn't look right. They aren't finding ways to get Jalen Waddle involved. If you have him on your fantasy team this year, you certainly have felt that. Yeah. Even Tyreek hasn't quite had the same level of success as he's had in recent seasons. So I think it's fair to have the Miami Dolphins, despite all of the injuries, as one of your teams that's been the most disappointing this year as well. All right, Alex, next thing we got to get to. You know how much I love Anthony Richardson. I should clarify how much I loved past tense, Anthony Richardson.
You still love him. You got a poster up at home. You got a fat head in your room.
And I do think that Anthony Richardson still has a chance to be a good quarterback in the long term. But the Colts announced yesterday that they were going to bench him in favor of Joe Flacco. At the time, my assumption is this is kind of a reset. And it had even been framed that way publicly. There were a couple of reporters that said, hey, they're going to get Anthony Richardson back in there, but they've got a bye week in week 14. He needs to take a step back. Playing against Minnesota, Buffalo, New York, and Detroit over the next 4 weeks is probably not a great scenario for him. Let's get a reset here. Team is still in playoff contention. Let's go with our better quarterback in Joe Flacco. We'll see what he looks like down the stretch with Anthony Richardson. That's not what Shane Steichen, the head coach, said today, though. Steichen came out and said, this isn't a part-time thing. This isn't a tryout for Joe Flacco. Flacco is our starting quarterback the rest of the way. Alex, what do you make of this? Do you think that the Anthony Richardson experience is now over in Indianapolis?
I love the decision because if you're the Colts, like, you believe you're a playoff team, and frankly, your conference has allowed you to be a playoff team, and you don't have a shot at winning anything with Anthony Richardson as your quarterback right now. Joe Flacco is the guy that has been better in the short sample size that you saw. I don't know if I'm ready to call it a bust yet because this is only the second year for Anthony Richardson, and last year it was injured. I do think
Played
that
10 NFL games.
I do think that there needs to be a come to Jesus moment for Anthony Richardson to where, hey, man, you need to sit back and recognize that this is a gift, and if you're not going to take it, you're going to be out of the NFL quick. And I think that's what they're trying to accomplish right now with, look, Joe Flacco, who basically was retired last year and comes back, he has now taken your job because you are not performing and you got a bad attitude.
That's the thing to me. I think this is not about the performance on the field. You can live with it. Now, completing 31% of your passes coming off of a game in which you completed 41% of your passes is not a good sign of where things are standing right now. However, he's also a guy that takes a lot of deep shots, so you would in general expect that the completion percentage would be lower than for other players. The YOLO offense, as you called it earlier this season, T-Bone, that's a good description of it. He's throwing deep shots. He's a guy, kind of like Russell Wilson, honestly, where it's just a lot of deep balls, and you complete them about 50% of the time, and if you do that, it's like hitting a three-pointer. You don't have to have the same shooting percentage in the NBA if you complete, or if you shoot more threes than twos. It's just the way the math works. Same thing is true for Anthony Richardson. You can live with the lack of accuracy. What you cannot live with is him losing the team. And I believe he lost the locker room on Sunday when he not only took himself out, but then after the game said publicly, I took myself out because I was tired. That you can't come back from that. You can't. And maybe he wins them back over and he has some kind of a mea culpa, but right now, this is Joe Flacco's team. And I don't know if Anthony Richardson is going to be able to win them back over unless he has a, in your words, Alex, come to Jesus moment. Yeah. Because that was the moment for me that he lost his
that's
job.
Frankly why I think you're doing this. You're doing this because it's like, look, you lost your job to Joe Flacco and you're not getting the opportunity again unless an injury happens. And then we're talking about him at some point once again. But I think this is the year where they expect him to have a little self-evaluation. And if you don't by next season, then you're probably done with the Colts, and good luck finding another job as a starting quarterback.
And I just think, too, like, this probably is the best thing for his development. Is not only do you need to have the kind of come to Jesus moment, you've got to kind of take the self-evaluation and try and grow from this and learn from your mistakes, especially of the, hey, I want to get out of the game right now because I'm, quote, tired. I also think, like, it's clear he wasn't ready for the NFL. I think that everybody said when he got drafted, hey, he's probably a guy that needs maybe a year to sit behind somebody. I think he, started 11 career college games or something. This is probably where you look at this and say, okay, is it better for us to keep throwing him out there and forget the whole aspect of he probably lost the team? Is it better for us to throw him out there and have him go through these growing pains? Or is it better for us to sit him and see if he can learn from Joe Flacco? And I think the answer is the second one there. I think it's better for him to just sit the rest of the season, see if he can learn, and then you try it again next season and go from there.
I do have an update on this from players that are speaking with the media right now at the Colts facility. Anthony Richardson says that head coach Shane Steichen didn't necessarily explain why he won't be starting anymore. Michael Pittman Jr. then went up to the podium and said he found out about the quarterback change through social media. I'm reading between the lines here. I bet this was an ownership call. My guess is ownership went to the coaching staff and said, Joe Flacco is now your starting quarterback. It wouldn't surprise me. That guy's a crazy person.
If I'm Shane Steichen,
Jim Irsay wants to win.
Do I need to give Anthony Richardson an explanation as to why?
Yes, absolutely.
Pretty sure the explanation, you know it yourself.
Sure, but you also have to explain it to him. If you're the head coach, it is your job to explain why moves are happening. And honestly, in a situation like this, it's super easy. And it helps him learn the lesson that's necessary here. Hey, Anthony, you lost the locker room. With what you did on Sunday, that was such an unacceptable and unforgiving thing to do on the field that I can't put you back out there as the starting quarterback. And you've got to learn what it is to be a quarterback at this level. That doesn't just include your performance on the field. It also includes how you conduct yourself on the field. And what you done on Sunday, we can't have that again. So we got to go to Joe. He's going to be a pro out there, and you can learn a lot from him. Watch the way that he conducts himself. Watch the way that he performs while he's on the field. Watch the way that he pushes through while he's hurt or whatever. That is, to me, the way that you can explain this if you're Shane Steichen. I don't think it's a hard conversation to have at all, but you absolutely need to do that if you're in his role. And Michael Pittman Jr. saying that he found out about the quarterback change through social media
is ridiculous.
That, to me, suggests that this came from ownership. And if it came from ownership, it's not surprising because Jim Irsay is nuts. And it also suggests that this is an organization that's in complete disarray. And I don't disagree with them deciding to go with a different quarterback, but this is not the way that decision should have been handled. So Anthony Richardson might have a long-term no real status as an NFL quarterback. I don't think he's getting a good shake of it in Indianapolis either. And he also needs to learn a lot of lessons. There's nobody that comes out of this looking good. Nobody. Organization, coach, general manager, owner, player, none of them end up coming out looking good on this. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, kind of reminds me of Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. Baker was part of the problem. They also had a hell of a lot of other problems while he was there. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. You give us a scenario. You give us your questions.
That's
we'll
a scenario.
Yeah, or scenarios,
you were
whatever
successful.
Here on BK and Ferrario. I glitched.
Classic
He had a farty.
I went into AI mode, and
AI mode.
it wasn't good. Dude, AI scares me. Probably could have a conversation about this, but I don't think we need to right now.
Why does AI scare you, man? Did you watch iRobot the other night with Will Smith?
No, just in general, like, I watched Black Mirror. I don't know if you ever seen the show.
Yeah, that'll do it to you.
Yeah.
There was...
I don't have an Alexa in my house for that reason.
Yeah, Kara got one for us.
Oh, yeah. I don't want people listening to my conversations.
Never mind. I wouldn't worry about that one.
Yeah, that's like the least of my concerns. You can now, like, recreate audio or videos or pictures, and it looks real, and people just assume that it's real, and this has a million different applications in the world, including what we do, which is also scary. So there's a lot there.
Remember the junk drawer from yesterday where I told you Apple is paying $1 million to hack into their AI?
Yeah, BK was excited about it.
I'm 90% sure that that's not just a, hey, here's a fun challenge, more of, oh, crap, we don't know how to get into our own system. So if you can figure it out, here's $1 million.
Worth it, if that's the case. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. Guys, who do you think will be the Cardinals' 2025 opening day starter?
Miles Michaelis.
I hope not.
Eric Fetty?
I don't know if he's going to be here.
I think that's got
I'm
more
with you,
trade value than most guys on your roster.
Agreed. Reading between the lines from everybody that is closer to the team than we are, I don't get the sense that they view that the same way that we do.
That Fetty's on the market. I wonder if they're going to save him for the deadline.
I could see it.
Why, I don't fully get, but...
I would be looking to trade him this offseason. That would be a guy that I would absolutely...
Anytime there's a pitcher you want to trade, I wouldn't hold on to him to the deadline.
Especially a starter.
Yeah.
And with 1 year, $7 million
deal, yeah.
He's got... I don't think you're going to find any more value than you will this offseason, but...
I'll go...
and he doesn't have no trade.
There's nothing that screams refresh/youth movement than saying, hey, all the young kids are in the starting lineup, and Andre Palante starts opening day. Oof. That's how you kind of sell the youth movement, quote unquote. He ain't bringing brought back.
All right,
Final rodeo.
399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, why would you ship out a cheap starter? Very simple. Return on investment.
And you're refreshing.
Yeah,
I don't need a guy that's not a part of my
plan.
plans.
It a refresh?
No,
I don't like that.
Refresh.
It was labeled as a refresh. I don't care what
It's
you
a
like.
retool.
It's brought to you by
rebuild, whatever.
It's a
Febreze.
rebuild, but it's refresh.
Yeah,
It's a fresh.
I'm done with the refresh.
Most not
stuff.
calling it a retool.
You're done with it, and it hasn't even started, man.
I'm out. I think it's a terrible phrasing.
Oh, well, stay tuned because in
Nobody
2
knows
months,
what that means. It's a totally
Stay tuned because in 2 months, BK is going to tell you why the Cardinals are going to be better than you expect them to
He's
be.
already
I do
doing that. What
believe
you
that. I
mean?
just think this idea of like a refresh. No, get out of here.
I think it's going to be refreshingly bad.
Somebody said, guys, I have Derrick Henry as my number one running back.
Good for
if
you.
you had to, if you guys had to decide who the number one running back will be for the rest of the season, who would you pick?
Derrick Henry.
You think he'll be the number one fantasy running back the rest of the way?
Yeah, I think it's going to be him.
I saw something on this. So
I don't know if anybody's going to out-Trump that, man. He's
Saquon?
good.
Saquon will be up there. I think
Kenneth
Kyron
Walker.
Williams will be up there because he gets in the passing game.
Brees Hall could. You can make a case for him.
Jahmyr Gibbs because he's in both the passing and the running game.
Bijan has been really good the last couple of weeks. Christian
crap out of me.
McCaffrey, we'll see what he looks like when he gets
I
back.
still think
hopefully.
it's going to be
Crossed.
Derrick Henry for how he plays. It's just going to be, you're going to see multiple touchdowns every single game with him. You just got to get to the red zone. And now they've got another weapon that they can throw to. You're going to end up in the red zone more times than not. And all you got to do is hand it to Derrick Henry.
My fantasy formula is typically take a running back in the first round and then take a bunch of receivers and then get back to running back again.
How'd that work for you this year, man?
Not well this year, dude. Because all of the receivers got hurt. All of them. Yeah. Nico Collins, Rashee Rice. Like, it's just on.
I took two running backs, and both have been good, but my wide receivers have not been.
This has been the weird year where typically I'm kind of, hey, I do more of the running backs late because you can get guys with a higher floor but also a lower ceiling, and then you can find guys on the waiver wire. It's actually been just complete opposite where wide receiver is the one that's been dealing with all the injuries. But if I had to choose a running back that I think would get up there, I would probably go with Bijan Robinson. That'll get up there. He'll be involved in the passing game. He's got the running game. The one thing that hurts Barkley, or could hurt Barkley, is when they get to like the 2-yard line.
Tush push.
The tush push just takes away so many touchdowns. Like Hurts had what, 3? Mm-hmm. Barkley did like all the heavy carrying, and then there's Hurts just getting his butt pushed, and here he is with a touchdown.
It's very frustrating. Saquon's been awesome for them. I figured he would be good. I didn't know he was going to be this good with him. All right, from the 980. Guys, after 6 games of watching the Blues, everybody was very high on this team. But after seeing that they're pretty much the same team performance-wise as last season with just new faces, are you still as high on them as you were after 6 games? I'm probably not as high as I was after 6 games. I would also say that injuries have a lot to do with that. Robert Thomas going down for as long as he's going to be out, it's going to be a difficult thing for this team to overcome. Matthew Joseph is a huge loss for this team. I know people want to say that I'm overstating it. I don't think that I am. The reason I'm excited about the Blues has less to do with the on-ice product right now and more to do with what it means for the next 3 to 5 years. Broberg being added to this mix completely changes their outlook. Same thing for Dylan Holloway. I think Jake Neighbors is having a nice season coming off of what was an excellent first full season for him in the NHL. So it has more to do with what I think they can be than what they are currently, if that makes sense.
Yeah, mine hasn't changed. I still think they're going to be a playoff team. I think you're one of those bottom wild card spots. I think this is sometimes what the starts of season looks like. You're ups, you're downs. It's going to Hitch always put it into like 10-game segments. You've seen a 10-game segment for this team, and it's been okay. You've seen the highs, you've seen the lows. What's the next 10-game segment look like? Like typically middle of November is when you really start to get an idea of who this team is. You don't have Thomas. That's a hard part to judge this off of. I'm hopeful that the Matthew Joseph thing is very minor and he's back, but my opinion on them hasn't changed. I don't think they do anything beyond the postseason, but I still think you're a fringe postseason team.
My opinion hasn't changed on them because this is kind of what I thought they'd be. In fact, they're a little better than I thought they'd be. Because I just look at them. They got a bunch of third liners basically playing up and down their lineup. They've got stars, if you want to call them that, in Booch, who's playing out of position, and Kyrou, who's a streaky goal scorer. If you look at when they were winning still, like the first 6 games to that texture's point, weren't generating a lot of 5-on-5 offense. When they did generate, it was from the outside. Their special teams isn't very good. Their goaltending's been lifting up. Their defense has been good, but the goaltending's helping lift it up a little bit as well. And looking at them, and they don't come out and they don't start games right away. They fall behind 2-0 consistently. I'm not shocked that we're starting to see them fall back to the pack.
Yeah, I think the special teams that you mentioned have gone a little under the radar. They've really been struggling. Power play,
PK.
3 for their last 19.
PK has been awful.
PK has been really bad. Matthew Joseph is another big loss for the penalty kill.
Thomas as well.
He hasn't been playing it this year.
Thomas has been their third option. They've been using a lot of the other guys to keep Thomas fresh.
So it's just not a good situation right now. I think it can get better, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll play a game of More Likely to Happen. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved for that. But coming up next, John Mozeliak has some interesting comments yesterday, and it got me and T-Bone into a shouting match in the office before the show. So we'll get into that coming up next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK. All right, so we got to talk about this. Because this morning, T-Bone called me Big Bird, and he wasn't kidding. He meant it. He was big mad.
He got red in the face.
You told me to watch the game.
He got more mad than I think I've ever gotten with you.
I don't think that's true.
Actually, hold on. I just think I want to sit back, and I think I'm going to sit and enjoy this
I'm
one.
sitting down for a reason right now.
I think I'm going to enjoy this.
Martin Kilcoyne was able to sit down with John Mozeliak, and I thought they had some really interesting discussions. We talked about a couple of the things that Mo had to say in this interview yesterday on the show, and there were a couple other quotes that I think are worthwhile for us to discuss here, Alex, because he was asked a couple of different things. One, first thing that I want to get to here is about the Cardinals not developing a star. I found the question to be fascinating. So Martin Kilcoyne basically asked what all of us have been wondering. How did you get here? 2011 to 2014, you guys are in the NLCS every year. 2015, you won 100 games. And since then, it feels like everything changed starting in 2016 and really beginning in like 2018, 19 or so. What happened? How did you get to where you are today, where you're having to do a retool, refresh, rebuild, whatever the bleep they want to call it? Here's John Mozeliak in his response to that question.
I think the biggest thing is you have to end up having, that impact type player. And when you think back to, and I can only use my time as an experience, but I can also reflect on what I see other teams doing. But, we had Albert Pujols for a decade, and we could then build around it. And then you think back to 2013, and we had young Mr. Tavares emerging as we thought would be that type of impact bat. He passes away. I think that's when things really shifted for us, because we didn't have anything coming up in the pipeline. So what did we end up doing? We ended up going out and trading for Ozuna, trading for Goldschmidt, trading for Arenado. I think what it tells you is it's hard to build a team strictly based on trades and free agency. You organically need to be producing some level, or really some elite level of talent.
That audio courtesy of Fox 2. Again, that comes from Martin Kilcoyne. Sit down with John Mozeliak. If you want to see it in its entirety, it's up on the Fox 2 website right now. Alex, I'm going to get some pushback on this, I'm sure. I agree with what John Mozeliak is saying there. I do. I think people have overstated the amount to which the Cardinals' infrastructure has broken their position players. I don't think that's true. I think the Cardinals continue to produce really solid major league players. Look at what Tommy Edman's doing in the World Series right now, what he did in the NLCS. That's a guy that's just an all-around baseball player. Same thing is true for Brendan Donovan. You know who's a really good baseball player? Lars Nootbaar. Now, he's not on the field as much as you would want, and he's not a superstar, but he's a really solid baseball player. Like, they do a good job of developing those guys in their minor league system, and have throughout the entirety of John Mozeliak's tenure. What they have failed to do now for more than a decade is develop a superstar from within. They thought they were going to be able to have that with Oscar Taveras prior to his tragic passing. And then they thought they would be able to have that with Dylan Carlson. They thought they would have that with Nolan Gorman. They thought they might have that with Jordan Walker. It just hasn't worked at the major league level. And there's different reasons for everything, but regardless of the explanations, excuses, whatever you want to call it, it has not worked thus far. And so what they ended up having to do was trade, try to accumulate talent, try to get more talent. And when you make those kinds of deals, at least when it comes to the Marcell Ozuna one, you end up giving up a lot. And that was always going to be the case at some point. At some point, if you continue chasing that star because you haven't developed one internally, you're going to have to give up more talent than what you'd like. And then they end up chasing the star position or the star pitcher because they traded one away, and that's how you end up trading Randy Arozarena. They've been chasing their tail ever since. In a lot of ways, the Cardinals are operating as an organization the way that the Blues do in individual games, where, yes, you can catch it eventually, but it's always going to catch up to you down the road if the Blues continue to chase these games in each individual game by getting down by multiple goals. So I think he's right. The Cardinals do need to develop a star. Where I think everybody goes on their separate paths, though, is that the only way to acquire the star? Can you go out there and sign one and then trade for one that is still on his early portion of the contract, pre-arb, arbitration, club control remaining? I think it almost becomes necessary to have a guy on a club control contract, like pre-arb or arbitration, where they're still cheap, because then it allows you to spend that money elsewhere. And because the Cardinals operate with a budget, they're not going to be the Mets, they're not going to be the Phillies, they're not going to be the Dodgers. That's never going to be the way that they operate. I almost think you do need to have a star position player on a deal that is below market value or part of their rookie level contract for this team to reach its peak performance level. How do you feel about that, Alex? What did you think of what you heard from John Mozeliak?
I mean, in a sense, yeah, I understand what he's saying, but I mean, to sit there and say like, well, we just never been able to develop an elite talent, and that's what put us in this position. I mean, that's like saying I can't live the life I want to live until I hit the lottery, and until then, I'm just going to live by the bare minimum. This is one of the most impossible things to do in all of Major League Baseball, is to find a superstar and develop him and bring him up through the system and have him be the superstar at the major league level. And if you're telling me that from the moment Albert Pujols left up until now that you're just recognizing that, man, it's difficult to find these superstar type players, but that's how we get back to the point of success, and that's what these other teams are doing, fine. But you need to understand, and frankly, I think that kind of tells you that this is not a refresh. This is a longer process then, because you're going to be searching through a lot of players to try and find this superstar. And I think the frustrating part for me is, if you realize and recognize that that is such a difficult thing to accomplish in terms of finding and developing the superstars. And again, Tavares passed away. That's a difficult thing to handle, and you have to chase a little bit there. But Dylan Carlson, you thought it was. Tyler O'Neill, you acquired and hoped it was. And then with Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, all of these players that, yeah, we went out there and we found these guys and we think that we can develop them into them. But all the while, you're going to sit there and just hope that the roster you put together is going to have success. They were trying to acquire the players that fell in this parameter, whether it was Jason Hayward, Marcelo Zuna, but they were falling under the parameters that the Cardinals have put on themselves, to where it's like, yeah, but these guys aren't going to cost us as much as the big superstars might, so we'll go get these guys, and these guys can at least bide us time until we find the guy in our system that can become the superstar.
And to be fair, they tried it with Goldie and Arenado.
But again, under their parameters, that was kind of gifted to them, but also on the back end of their career, to where it's like, we're not going to have to pay these guys money for 10, 12, 13 years.
But they also thought that they had Carlson coming and Gorman coming and Walker
some of that
coming.
Self-evaluation and understanding that, hey, you have to kind of be like, it feels like the Cardinals got to the point where they were just lying to themselves, saying this is still a superstar, this is still a superstar, and weren't willing to cut ties. I'm getting all of this to say this: at some point, as an organization, you have to recognize how difficult this task is and go out there and sign a superstar or trade a superstar. Yeah, you got to pay him a lot of money, but you know what it does? It gives you the opportunity to take your time and find that cost-controlled superstar in the making, but meanwhile, you're still able to compete.
So I do want to say one thing, and T-Bone, I do want to hear from you as well. I think that part of what they might be trying to do here, and all of this is reading between the lines because the Cardinals haven't said a lot publicly, just being candid. We tried. They said that they don't have time to do it right now. So it is what it is.
Well, clearly wasn't that busy.
Yeah, whatever.
John.
So I do think some of what they're trying to accomplish, again, reading between the lines this season, is, hey, we maybe didn't have the same kind of runway for young players that we should have. The Cardinals had young players that would struggle, and they would be in and out of the lineup because of the struggles, or they would be up and down in AAA and majors because of those struggles, because there is always pressure in St. Louis to win. It is always about winning today. I think the Blues are running into some of this right now, where, or at least earlier in the season with Zach Bolduc, for example, where it was like, Bolduc hurt us in that last game. Let's go ahead and bench him for the next couple. No, that's not what the season's about. This season is not about getting to a Stanley Cup. This season is about development. This season is about winning for 2026, not for 2024. And that's hard. That's a really hard thing to stay true to, but you have to, because there's a payoff at the end. And I think the Cardinals have been operating this way for 15 years, or it's about really 25 years, where it's about winning for today, always, at the expense of whatever else comes. And so when you don't have that superstar that's already here and you're trying to groom that next guy, it's really hard to do that, because you do have to stick with them through their struggles. The Brewers did it this year. They stayed true to who they were and also were able to bring up, despite the struggles early on, Jackson Chourio. They stuck with him throughout all of those struggles, and they found a way to make it work and make the playoffs. The Arizona Diamondbacks this year. Now, he already had a big contract, so that probably plays into this a little bit. But Corbin Carroll struggled mightily early this season. He eventually got himself back on track, and it took a lot of time, and they missed the playoffs in part because he was such a drag on the offense. But they stuck with him, and he ended up becoming, by the end of the season, the superstar we all know him to be. I don't know if that would have happened for Jordan Walker or Nolan Gorman or Dylan Carlson. It's possible it was just never going to be never going to come to fruition for them, and they were never going to be superstars for the Cardinals. But I do wonder if in different circumstances, if the Cardinals weren't a contender over the last couple of seasons and they were just, playing for the future, what would it look like right now for Jordan Walker? I don't know, but I think it would have looked potentially different. I think that's what they're trying to find out in 2025.
So that I do agree with. I don't think they gave the proper runway for a Jordan Walker this year. Now, granted, he was clearly so lost at the plate that even sending him down, I didn't really have a problem with it at the time, but I would have totally understood sticking with him. I also think at some point in last year, to me, you weren't ever a real, true World Series contender.
Right.
And when you're not that, I think there is more leeway. That's why the Brewers, to me, can do what they did with Jackson Chourio. Not only do they still feel some pressure to win in Milwaukee? I would think so, even though there were no expectations for them. But they also are willing to admit, hey, we're not going to end up winning a World Series, so you know what? We can take our time. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but sure, we're going to continue to try and run this out there. I think that's where I disagree with what the Cardinals' approach was.
But the Cardinals I think they've convinced themselves, even if it wasn't true, even over the last couple of years, hey, we can fix this. By the end of the year, we will fix this. We will get this back on track. Because for so long, they've been a second-half team. Think about 2021 when they went on that 17-game winning streak. Now, you can't consistently expect that to be the case. That's why it's a once-in-a-generation kind of
listen to their narrative every season. Well, we're a second-half team, and we can turn it on late.
And it's not always going to work out that way. But when you convince yourself of that as an organization, you operate in a way where you're always trying to make the best team possible for the next day, even at the expense of your younger players. And I do think that's cost them at times. And again, I don't know, would Walker be 5% better right now, 50% better, or 0% better if they were operating the way that some of these other teams have been? I don't know. It's impossible to be able to say that. But I think they want to find out this year. And I believe they see Gorman and Walker as their two outs to potentially have a star. And this is their best way to go about it this way. The truth is, the reason why they're taking a step back is because of the money. It's all about the financials. That's the honest-to-God assessment of this, is if they didn't have the Bally Sports situation, I'm guessing they probably don't take this kind of a sizable step back with payroll this upcoming year. But it's a convenient excuse. Companies do this all the time, not just in sports. Hey, we've got this excuse to make the changes that we wanted to make anyways. It's an easy sell for us. Let's go ahead and do this now. I'm curious to see what it looks like.
Yeah, and again, I don't have an issue with the whole Walker thing. I agree with what you're saying. What I just disagree with when they talk about why did this go south is because the lack of a development of a star. I think their model has been fine. Hey, maybe we don't develop the stars, so we'll go out and we'll trade for them. We'll sign them to their long-term extensions, or in the case of Arenado, he already had a deal. I think that works because what has the Cardinals development system done? It's developed those supplementary pieces. What it hasn't developed is a superstar. And I think you need to play into that is, hey, we can't develop a superstar. And it is, let's just be honest, it's 5 times easier to develop a Brendan Donovan, a Lars Nootbaar, guys like that. Mason, those guys are so much easier to develop than the guy that's 30% above league average playing for an MVP. Those guys come once in a blue moon. I think where they went wrong with the model was they traded for the wrong stars, and then their pitching, they never replenish it when they do pull off the Ozuna deal. Ozuna, they missed. Arenado looks like a miss, if we're being honest. He's only had one real year where you're like, that's what we traded for, even though you didn't give up a lot in that deal, and I totally agree it kind of fell into their lap. They missed on the 2 stars. They got it right with Goldie. Yeah, they got it right with the Goldschmidt deal. That one was a win until the back end, but we all knew he was going to fall off the table at some point. Age catches up with everybody. Where they missed was they missed the 2nd star. They didn't get the Ozuna deal right. They traded for the wrong guy there. The Hayward deal, they actually got a blessing in disguise when he didn't sign the contract extension. You look at the deal for Nolan Arenado. Again, it looks like a miss right now. To me, this model can still work long as you're able to develop pitching, which they fell behind on, and then you're also able to develop those complementary pieces, and you get it right when you trade for those stars. That's why I just disagree with, the whole reason this went south, we didn't develop our own internal superstar. That was the main problem. No, the main problem was you traded for the wrong superstars.
It's also hard to trade for the right one. How many of those guys have actually changed teams over the last decade? It's really hard to find them, especially the Cardinals have operated under so many restrictions. And I want to stick on this topic. Let's continue this on the other side. But the Cardinals have operated under so many restrictions over the last 20 years that it's hard to be able to. Like, you weren't going to trade for Francisco Lindor because you weren't going to give him the contract that he was deserving of. Same thing is true of Mookie Betts. They weren't going to go into free agency and sign Bryce Harper or Manny Machado because they were unwilling to give the 10-plus year contracts. I disagree with that philosophy. I want to make that very clear. I think they should have been willing to do that. But if your ownership tells you you can't do these things, well, then as a general manager, I have to operate under those parameters. So I can't go out and get those guys. I have to go out and trade for my star position player because we have not developed them from within. It's really hard to find the guy under those restrictions that I could have traded for that would have worked out for the Cardinals.
But then you needed to adapt a different model a long time ago, rather than sit there with the same model of saying, like, well, we'll go out there and we'll find these guys that can just piece it together until we get there.
Maybe
you might have needed to adapt a Tampa Bay Rays model a long time ago.
And this is what gets back to T-Bone's point, and I think it's the best one, T-Bone. You're right. It ultimately comes back to the pitching. Because if you're going to trade for these guys like Goldie and Arenado, they cost a ton of money. Yeah. It's just true. When you're having the restrictions financially that the Cardinals do, they're going to spend $170 million or so. That's $60 million of it. It means you better have pitching from within that is cheap and cost controlled, so that way I can go out and spend on other stuff. Because otherwise I've spent so much on my pitching and so much on these two stars, I don't have any left over to be able to fill the gaps.
The $30 million that you had to spend on your back end of your rotation, think about it, Matt, Gibson, Lynn this year.
40 almost.
Yeah, if you can develop like one or two guys just internally that can take that are cost control, well, boom, now I've got another $20 to $30 million that free up for either A, that third guy that needs to come in like a Contreras that they had, or a guy that can come in like a Sonny Gray and then lead the rotation, and then you've got the pitching behind him.
All right, so John Mozeliak did have one other comment that I wanted to get to on the other side. We'll get to that coming up next here on BK and Ferrario. All right, so we got to continue our conversation. John Mozeliak was on Fox 2 with Martin Kilcoyne. You can hear Martin Kilcoyne, by the way, weekdays from 7 to 10 on 101 ESPN. He's on with TMA from 7 to 10. TMA continues from 10 to 11. So that's the way that their show operates. So Alex T-Bone, I'm BK. John Mozeliak was asked about development versus spending, how he views the next iteration of the St. Louis Cardinals. Here's what John Mozeliak had to say. Again, this courtesy of Fox 2.
Well, I think last year we invested pretty heavily in our starting rotation, and it still wasn't enough to put us over the top. And when you look at some of what else is happening in the league, you see other teams that have less of a payroll, but their commitment to development has proven to be fruitful. And so, we really took a hard look at what we're doing. I don't feel like our player development system or our amateur scouting department has not been productive. But I do think when you look at the business right now and everybody's fighting on the margins, you have to be getting the most out of your talent. And so ultimately, these changes we're making is really to do that.
All right, so this is where T-Bone and I got into it.
Oh, hold on. I'm going to just sit back on this one, boys.
I didn't love the way that the Cardinals went about their offseason last year. We talked about it a million different times. We all wanted more upside in the rotation. But I think the end results were kind of what they expected. I don't think their rotation was the problem last year. Now, they paid way too much for what they got. And the problem is, and T-Bone, this is where we 100% agree, they should have been able to develop Kyle Gibson. They should have been able to develop Lance Lynn. Not those exact ones. They literally did, but
develop Lance
I got
Lynn.
it.
You got there.
The point was they should have been able to get 170 innings with a 4.2 ERA last season, which is what Kyle Gibson gave you, out of somebody from their own system. They should have been able to get 120 innings and a 3.85 ERA from somebody within their system.
Hey, look at Michael Wacha since his time away from the Cardinals.
Right, but I'm talking about the next Michael Wacha.
Well, they had that guy internally. Well, not maybe the Wacha, but Palante should have been that guy.
Palante should have been that guy last year.
McGreevy should have been that guy, if we're being honest.
100%. They should have these players that can give you those numbers in their system for $1 million. And instead, it feels like every year they're spending $12 million for that kind of production. And it's not just one spot in your rotation. It's Gibson, $12 million. It's Lynn, $12 million. It's Michaelis, $18 million. It's Steven Matz, $12 million. That's a expensive rotation, and I didn't even mention the $30 million dude that's at the front end of things. That's where things have really gone awry for the Cardinals. Yes, they lack a superstar, but you can go out there and find other ways to get one. What they're really missing is the ability to develop the pitching. That being said, I think this year the pitching was fine. So it's this weird whack-a-mole thing, what we always do with the Cardinals, where one year it's the pitching, the next year it's the offense, the next year it's the bullpen, and then it's the starting staff. It's always something that seems to go awry for them. I thought the pitching was more than fine this year. I look at the teams that are in the postseason. These rotations stink, man. Nobody can find a third starter, much less a fourth or a fifth starter. So I think the Cardinals' rotation would have eventually been fine had they made the postseason. Their problem this year was their lack of offense. So I know it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but long term, the sustainability of this model was zero. They could not continue to operate the way that they were. But in the immediate term, I think the bigger problem for them is the offense. T-Bone, sorry, I'll sit down now.
I think their bigger problem, I agree, is the offense now moving forward. I mean, they don't have a star in their lineup. That's why, when we've talked about what we think their record could be next year, and you're over there with your 80 to 90 win, whatever, I'm looking at it going, no, they're a 70 to 75 win team. But I do think, him making the point of, well, we invested in our pitching. Sure, you invested in the dollar amount. To me, you didn't invest in enough talent in the rotation. And I agree, the offense was their biggest problem last year. Their pitching also couldn't uplift them, by the way. And look, when you don't have your two stars not hit, it's going to be hard for your pitching to lift you up. But we all knew when you bring in a Lance Lynn and a Kyle Gibson on one-year deals and you end up having three guys in your rotation on top of a fourth that could barely stay healthy in Steven Matz, and those three guys that I'm talking about are Michaelis, Gibson, and Lynn, were top 5 in hits allowed last season. Well, yeah, your pitching wasn't going to be very good. And it wasn't very good. It was better compared to last year. And I think that's where some of this gets misconstrued a bit, is everybody says, well, their pitching was fine. Sure, their pitching was fine when you compare to the crap they threw out in 2023. Their pitching was not good enough this year still. And
their pitching was better in terms of their rotation ERA than I think people give it credit for, though, because the Dodgers had the same ERA as the Cardinals did this year.
And the reason people look at their pitching and say it's better also is because I think the bullpen masked a lot of the issues in your starting rotation.
And this is where it's hard for me, where I'm going to talk out both ends of my you-know-what. I still think the Dodgers have better starting pitching than you. The problem for the Dodgers, it was hurt. And they've got Glass now when he was healthy. You've got Yamamoto, who BK doesn't like. Jack Flaherty now in the mix for their rotation. Walker Buehler, who didn't have a very good year, but we're seeing he has the stuff to uplift himself. What I'm also looking at, what I'm talking about, like, I'm not shocked that their pitching didn't work and it also couldn't uplift them when the offense went awry this season, is they didn't pay for enough stuff this offseason. Sonny Gray's got that. Then you've got 4 number 4s in your rotation.
But they said that they weren't going to do that this offseason. They told us their goal was to go get guys who could pitch 200 innings for them.
And that's where things get really tough.
And I didn't agree with that model, by the way.
But that's because they don't know how to develop pitching in their minor league system.
Correct, because if they felt like they had guys in their minor league system, that's such an important point, Alex. Because if they had Michael McGreevy ready to go, if they had Gordon Graceffo ready to go, if they thought Tank Kintz would be ready to go, they could have signed Luis Severino or Michael Wacha or guys that have a little bit more upside, that have some injury questions. That's really where most of the upside belongs in the market that they were talking about, by the way, because if you're going to pay less, there's got to be a reason why they're available for less. For Severino, it was because he has injury questions. The dude hadn't thrown more than like 100 innings in the last 5 years, something like that. This year, he was great. Sean Manaea, huge injury questions. No idea if it was going to work with him in the rotation. But we've seen it at times in the past. He's been very good. Seth Lugo, real questions. Is this guy going to be a long-term starter? Can this work? The answer was yes. But the Cardinals didn't want to go that route because there were serious questions about it, and they needed more certainty. So you lock in Kyle Gibson in his 170 innings. You lock in Lance Lynn and what they thought was going to be like 25 starts this year for them, 120-plus innings, and at least get them to August. Get us to August so we can then hopefully have somebody that's emerged as a starting pitcher option for us. That's how the Cardinals end up locking themselves into these guys, is we don't trust our own system. And we so badly want none of them to pitch for us that we will go with the lesser option because at least it provides us certainty. And that's where the Cardinals got stuck.
Yeah. And that's why, like, though I show my frustration with it, it just shows how this really started to snowball on them. Because, sure, we can talk about the stars and the offense all you want, but, I mean, you guys are right. I mean, because in theory, what you would look at if you're the Cardinals, and this is where I thought maybe they would trust their system a little more, after talking with the vice president of projects on opening day. Now,
well, at
Michael
the time
Gersh,
he wasn't.
at the
Special
time,
projects for you.
Yeah.
It's special,
sorry.
you jerk.
Sorry. But at the talking with him, and I just felt like the whole idea of when you think of what the Cardinals wanted to do, my whole thought process was, okay, you want to buy time early in the year because the hope was you'd have a McGreevy, a Graceffo, a Zach Thompson potentially develop into roles as starters by the All-Star break. And if that's the case, to me, you don't have to lock in 170 innings of certainty. Can you lock in 70 to 80? And you probably could have gotten that with a Severino with his injury questions, with a Sean Manaea and his stuff with his injury questions. Hell, even a Seth Lou as a bullpen arm that was had converted into a starter. That's where I kind of disagree with what their thought process is. But if they were so scared of their system, of, hey, we have no faith in our system, it just goes to their bigger underlying problems as to why everything failed on them spectacularly.
The Cardinals have two different issues, and I think they get conflated. The Cardinals' issue on the pitching side of things is not developing depth. The Cardinals' issue on the position player side of things is not developing stars. One of them is way easier to fix than the other. You mentioned the lottery ticket of developing a star. That's 100% the case. It's so hard, dude. It's so hard. And sometimes they come out of nowhere. You'll end up with a Fernando Tatis Jr. was not the highest rated prospect in Major League Baseball when he ended up going through the White Sox system.
Look at Altuve. He came out for a baseball
Comes
tryout.
out of nowhere, right? A lot of them, Bryce Harper, he was a generational talent. Everybody knew that guy was going to be amazing. Some of them end up like the Dodgers trading, was it Tony for Tony Watson, and they give up Yordan Alvarez?
Yeah.
They had no idea. The Dodgers are one of the best organizations in Major League Baseball. I think they're excellent at being able to assess their own talent from within. They traded Yordan Alvarez for a couple of months of a middle inning reliever. So sometimes it just comes out of nowhere and you have no idea that it's going to happen, and it's a scratch-off ticket that you won $1 million from. The Cardinals have had neither. They haven't been able to find that guy that comes out of nowhere. They also haven't been able to hit on the first-round picks. That's their problem. star player-wise. On the pitching side of things, and this is where I think Chaim Bloom can have his biggest impact of anywhere on this team, the Cardinals have failed to develop a 3 through a 5 starter. I think Palante could be that guy. I think McGreevy could be that guy. You need to develop like 6 of them, because over the course of the season, you're going to need all of them to pitch innings for you over the course of the year. And if you could do that and they cost you $1 million instead of $12 million a piece, you're saving yourself $35 million there. Guess what that goes towards?
My God, the Cardinals build it was like, I could put that in my pocket.
Yeah, sure. Or you could go out there and either sign a superstar or pay for Sonny Gray's salary with that. Or pay for the next Sonny Gray salary with that. And that's how you end up making up this money somewhere else. They can do this. It shouldn't take 5 years for them to be able to do it. We'll see if it does.
I got to be honest. You guys sold the farm that I was expecting fisticuffs, and you two were way too nice that segment.
Well, T-Bone said earlier that
I get angrier at
the
BK.
Cardinals rotation had no ability to stack up against the Dodgers rotation, and that's really what set me off. I was
I
like,
still agree with that,
here
by
we
the
go.
way.
Now we're warming up,
the
boys.
Dodgers rotation's terrible. It's horrible,
It's
man.
better than the Cardinals. Put a poll up. That's what I said. And you're too scared, just like Mo in the Cardinals
Jack
system.
Flaherty, you have no idea what's going to be coming out of his right arm every other game.
really had
Yamamoto
only
goes
one bad
3
start.
innings. Their third starter is Walker Buehler, who 2 weeks ago people thought would maybe get $15 million in the free agency market because of how terrible he was this season. He has 2 good starts, and now he's off of our wish list.
The only game you would stack up in a best-of-7 series with the Dodgers is their bullpen game when you're like throwing, I don't know what the hell you're throwing.
true.
That's
Yes. Sonny Gray versus Flaherty is the
Whoever.
game you stack up.
Yes, and then
I'm
guess what?
taking
Game
Yamamoto
2.
in game 2 over whoever you're throwing.
Sure. Okay.
And I'm taking
the mystery
Buehler
box
probably
that is
over
what-
Gibson. Yes.
Wait, what'd you just say?
I'm taking Buehler over Gibson.
Good Lord,
Kyle,
man.
not Bob.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. More likely to happen is next. Hey, it's BK for Circus Sports in Illinois. If you haven't downloaded the app, what are you waiting on? It's football season. You got the World Series bet on. You got college football on Saturday, NFL on Sunday. You got to get over there to the Circus Sports app in the state of Illinois. Download it today. You're going to get the best odds over there. And Alex, for Game 5 of the World Series, I'm targeting the LA Dodgers. I think that was the last gasp for the New York Yankees. I think the Dodgers take it down tonight. I think Jack Flaherty, who I have talked some trash on, but I do think he's going to have a good game tonight. Jack Flaherty, at least 5 strikeouts and a Dodgers win, is plus 240, 2.5 to 1 over on the Circus Sports app. That's the bet I'm making tonight over on Circus Sports.
I'm going to steer you away from my betting advice after last night's Blues game, but I will tell you that you need to download the app because you're getting these type money line splits, which you're not going to get anywhere else. The better odds are over on Circus Sports Illinois. Those big parlays that I like to put together, those are bringing you in the most money possible because Circus not limiting you based off of your winnings. Plus, if you ever have issues, which you don't very much, you're dealing with actual people with the Circa customer service. It's like you're dealing with people at the Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Download the app today. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Tanner Hendrickson here at the Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues lost to the Senators last night, 8-1. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they visit the Philadelphia Flyers, wrapping up their road trip. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 6 with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, Game 5 of the World Series, as the Dodgers look to close out the Yankees in New York. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for more likely to happen. You give us 2 scenarios, we'll tell you which one is more likely. You're on BK and Ferrario. More likely to happen: the Kansas City Chiefs go undefeated during the regular season, or the Washington Commanders represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. Yeah, brother. Did a good one here.
I'm going to go more likely to happen the Chiefs go undefeated. I don't. Washington's good, but I don't think Washington's that good. And I don't know who is in the NFC, but I saw what happened with the Houston Texans last year when they got to the postseason, and they were a fun team, but it went quick because you just don't have postseason. It's a different animal. That's going to be the same case for a Jaden Daniels in that offense. So I'll say Chiefs go undefeated. I think they actually can now with their acquisitions that they made via trade.
Yeah, I'll say more likely the Chiefs can go undefeated. I just don't know if Washington can get to the Super Bowl. And when I look at the Chiefs, I think I said this on opening night. Now, granted, a lot of their weapons have disappeared. I said if they don't play with their food, it's easy for me to see where they could go undefeated. Now, A, because their defense is unfreaking believable, and B, now they've got some reinforcements to help Patrick Mahomes. You're going to get Pacheco back at some point in the mix of things. And Mahomes, I expect to just keep elevating his game. Like, I don't think he's going to continue to be this guy that we look at and go, oh, he's not throwing for a lot of touchdowns. No, he's going to figure it out. And when he does, watch out.
I think it's Washington in the Super Bowl.
Really? As the Chiefs fan?
I don't think the Chiefs will take it seriously enough to go undefeated. The Chiefs are a team under Andy Reid that always rest their starters in the final week of the regular season, especially if they have veteran guys that are super important to their potential run. Travis Kelce ain't playing that Week 18 game against the Denver Broncos. No chance. And if they're undefeated at that point, they will already have victories against Buffalo and Houston the rest of the way. They will have already beaten head-to-head the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. They will have a 3-game lead over everybody. Their final 2 games of the regular season, forget just the game against Denver, final 2 games will mean nothing. They will already have had the number 1 seed locked up. So that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road on Christmas Day on a random Wednesday, that will mean nothing. And then the following week against Denver means nothing. I don't think the Chiefs are going to try to go undefeated. I don't think they're going to emphasize that. They've got other history of potentially going for a 3-peat for the first time ever. Washington is a good team, not a great team, but a good team. We've seen those kinds of teams make it to the Super Bowl before. I will take the Commanders. Alex, what do you got?
I think Washington gets wiped up by Detroit at some point. Guys, more likely to happen at the end of the season, Philip Broberg or Dylan Holloway get a contract extension?
Broberg. I'm now rethinking it. I feel like Holloway's the easier one to get done. So it's possible that they would go with Holloway and just do like a 5-year, $4 million per year kind of a deal.
But to that point, it is vastly more important to get Broberg locked up long term than it is Dylan Holloway.
8 years, $6 million per. Let's go. I don't think he would sign that.
Hell no, he wouldn't sign that. 8 years, $8 million, and I would sign that on the dotted lines compared to how he's trending right now.
I would say Broberg is the one for me still. I think when you're looking at these contract extensions, to me, you should prioritize not which one is easier, which one's the better player. And if that's the case, I'm locking up Broberg. If that means maybe you hurt Holloway's feelings and he can't work something out, look, you got a ton of third-liners on this team. You're not going to be able to keep all of them. To me, it's Broberg. He's the one that I would look at and say, you need to make sure you get him locked up. And
I think you try and get both done, and I think you do get both done because Holloway fits more into the DNA of this roster, but it's Broberg. You go to Broberg, heck, before the season's over and be like, hey, man, I know we just signed you to a 2-year deal, but we'd like to lock you up long term. Again, over getting excited right now, but I've seen everything you need to see from a 23-year-old defenseman to say this guy is a part of my core moving forward.
T-Bone?
Guys more likely to be a Cardinal come opening day. Wilson Contreras or Miles Michaelis?
Wilson Contreras. I don't think either gets moved, but if you're the Cardinals, I can find somebody to fill the spot of Miles Michaelis. I'll bring back Kyle Gibson. Don't trade Eric Fetty. You've got to cut Palante, fits into this role to where he's going to be able to eat innings for you. I personally value what Wilson Contreras brings, and that I don't think you can move on from.
Miles Michaelis is more likely to be here next year. Doesn't bring me joy to say, but I think Wilson Contreras has real value on the market. I do think that there would be a team, whether it's as a catcher, as a DH, as a first baseman, as an outfielder, whatever they want to bring him in as, I think he would be the kind of bat that teams would love to acquire. Hell, a team like the Mets, if they end up losing Pete Alonso, could you see him playing there? I could. I could see him being a big bat that they need for the middle of the order, right-handed, a little bit of thump, gets on base at a pretty high clip. I could see something like that for them. So the Astros have had interest in him in the past. They could potentially use him as well. I think there will be teams that are interested in Wilson Contreras, and they're contenders that he would be willing to go to most likely. I'm not sure what the interest level is going to be in a guy like Miles Michaelis. So I'll go Miles Michaelis more likely to be back. And you'll get an actual return for Wilson Contreras, whereas Michaelis, I don't think you get anything.
Yeah, that's why I would lean Michaelis will still be here. Is one, he's more of a complicated trade because he's got a no trade clause involved, and you got to eat some money on that deal. Though I do think there are some non-contenders that would take him because they're going to need somebody to eat innings in their rotation. I think Contreras, there still is some value. I don't know how much value there is, but I think somebody could at least convince themselves on him.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. 636 says more likely to happen. The Blues make the playoffs or the Cardinals finish last in the National League. I think it's more likely that the Cardinals finish last in the National League.
I was going to say it's more likely that the Blues make the playoffs.
Oh, wait, in the NL overall?
Yeah,
sorry, I was thinking of the Central. Probably
Rockies.
the Blues make the playoffs. My apologies. I don't think they're going to be that bad.
I thought Central as well.
That's my bad. I was...
Man, am I the only one that listens on this show?
Yeah, for a change today.
What'd you say?
Yeah, exactly. I would say Blues make the playoffs. I don't think they'll be as bad as like Colorado and Miami. If you said NL Central, though, I would probably take the Cardinals to be last in the NL Central.
I agree, too. All right. Next one up from the 314. More likely to happen, the Yankees come back and win the World Series, or the Cardinals make the postseason in 2025.
Okay, Yankees come back and win the World Series. Come on, guy. You just said they're a 70-win team next year.
I know, but them coming back from down 3-0 to win the World Series, that sure as hell ain't happening.
So is the Cardinals making the postseason.
The Yankees are 7-1 to win the World Series right now. I wonder if there are odds yet on next year's World Series. Odds to win the 2025 World Series. The Cardinals are, drum roll please,
It's like plus 7,500.
50-1.
Yeah, that checks out.
So according to Vegas, much more likely the
Yeah.
Yankees come back.
Yeah, they got to win 3 games. The Cardinals got to win like
I don't think either's
100.
happening, but I'll say Yankees.
All right, last one here. More likely to happen, T-Bone gets a date, or T-Bone and BK throw hands in the studio.
Do you know, that was what I thought originally. More likely to happen, Tebow gets a date or BK gets punched before he gets fired.
I'm more likely to get fired first.
Oh, no, you'll just get punched. I'll leave it at that one.
I think more like I'm a lover, not a hater. So I think it would say more likely.
I was going to say, you
more
should
likely to happen.
There's
that
no
I
way
would
you're a
find
lover more than a
date.
hater.
Yeah. Oh
That's
yeah.
very much
I saw
not
how
accurate.
red you got in that room back there.
BK gets me this close to snapping. If I need to throw hands, I will.
Again, I've got.
Well,
And look,
that's the thing.
I'm
T-Bone
not,
will be.
I'm not going to be favored in any fight I start.
Again,
but I sure as hell am going to give it my all.
I've gotten angry in the past, but you got pretty mad. That was intense.
It's just the way he looked. He said, like, you don't watch the games. And then he, like, looks at me like bug-eyed. Like, I just said something crazy.
You did. You said something ridiculous. You said you would take Walker Buehler over.
His go-to, man, is you don't watch the
Everybody
games.
that is listening to this
That's
show
not
right
what I
now,
said.
It's such-
80% would say they were on my side.
It's such a tone thing, too, to be like, well, I watch everything, and you
that's
don't
not-
watch anything.
that's not
More
what I
just
said.
but I said he, like, jumps out of his chair. And, like, if you're watching this on YouTube, this is essentially what happened. What? Oh,
You
just,
looked away from the camera.
what?
There it is
Oh,
again,
that's
man.
your camera.
Yeah, what
There
are
it
you
is
looking at?
again, man.
I didn't say that. I said you get rid of. You do watch the games.
Even though, yeah,
It's the same thing.
Man,
That's actually worse.
I may need to change my more likely to happen answer.
Yeah, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Why did you get punched?
Hey, Alex, love you, man.
I don't care.
T-Bone,
No, I don't want to hear
I
it.
love you.
No.
Coming up in
Don't
15
look at
minutes.
me.
When he's sleeping in Alton that next time we go, man, I'm just going to fill a pillowcase up with
hope we go
soap
back to
bars
Alton
and
soon.
beat him over the head with
I hope we go to Vegas soon too.
Circa Sports
Hang out with
Resort.
Circa?
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
I'm cheap.
T-Bone, you can come along.
Yeah, when he sleeps, man, he's just...
Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues in 10 minutes. Junk Drawer is next. Let's dive into the juncture. Just a real quick one today because we got Chris Kerber on the other side. He's got a hard out at 110, so we'll get to him here in just a moment. But, Alex, the NBA is going through some stuff right now. I don't know how much you guys are watching the NBA right now. That wasn't Tony, right?
According to BK, I don't watch the NBA, so...
Okay.
No defense.
Anthony Edwards has attempted 90 shots this season. 53 of those 90 shots have been beyond the three-point line so far this year. The Celtics on opening night attempted like 65 three-point shots in one game. They had like 100 possessions, 65 three-point shots. It's insane.
Like how I played in grade school.
He's shooting, Anthony Edwards, 60% of his shots from beyond the arc. That's higher than James Harden ever has at any point in his career. He's playing like Ray Allen or Reggie Miller. And this is a guy that's one of the most athletic players in the league. He flies above the rim. You want him attempting dunks and mid-range jumpers and these kinds of things. Alex, I think the NBA is now reaching the point that Major League Baseball had reached 5 years ago probably, where it was home runs or strikeouts. And there was no other elements to the game. Defense had become unrecognizable for most fans. Aesthetically, it just wasn't the game that people enjoyed watching. Do you think the NBA, is there a rule change that can fix this, though? Because Major League Baseball was clear, hey, shift, make a couple of moves, like make it easier to steal bags. You can do a couple of things. How do you fix this for the NBA with their three-point line? I don't know.
I don't know because it's a cupcake to where they can just go out there and then throw it up and then see what happens. I don't know how you fix that. Because that just seems like what every guy that gets into the NBA has to have. You've got to have the three-point shot. You have to be able to make those shots. And it just seems like that's where the NBA's at. How do you make a 4-point line? That doesn't seem like it's going to make that much of a difference.
You would almost have to do a fours and threes because then just mathematically it's not worth as much as it would be to do twos and threes because you're 50% increasing your points per opportunity,
and then move the 4-point line back a little bit further, make everything else 3 points. But I don't think that
changes everything because then you're changing the records. Like now, guys are just increasing the points that they have over time,
and you've got nothing underneath the hoop, which I think is the more entertaining part when you have those physical battles underneath the net.
Like you could make dunks worth 3 points. I'm not even kidding.
Now that would be fun.
Because the thing that people like seeing in games, the most entertaining play is dunks at the rim, right? And then it becomes more likely that your big men become important. People like seeing big dudes do crazy stuff on the inside. Well, this increases the importance of a post presence. It increases the importance of defenders inside. So that's like the only thing that I can think of that would potentially help you here is dunks become 3 points. It sounds crazy, but a lot of rule changes sound crazy until you see them implemented. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it kind of fixed some of the things that we ended up not enjoying about the game. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joins us next here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, you know, one of the reasons that you like to work with a local company, and Classic Air Care is one of those kind of companies. Not only do they take great care of their people and the employees, which is why you get the great service, and you can find out all you need about that great service with their 4.8 Google rating on their website. Go to classicaircare.com and see what people are saying. But for me, they also give back to the community, and that's why I like talking about local companies. They give back to the community. They had a program called Feel the Love. They recently put in 3 new HVAC units in homes for people that need them as they head into the winter. And they did it free of charge. It's a program that they had. You can read the stories on the website. Families were nominated. 3 families have it now because of Classic Air Care. When you support a company like Classic Air Care, because you do have a choice. If something goes wrong or if you have the maintenance that needs to be done, you have a choice of who you can call. When you call a company like Classic Air Care, you know you're helping more than just your own house. You're helping them help other people. Classic Air Care. Check them out online at classicaircare.com.
With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. A short period of time with Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues. He joins us each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. He joins us via the Collier and Thompson hotline. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. Let's start out with the obvious. What happened to the Blues last night? What led to that kind of a lopsided loss?
Oh, you know what? I think games like that eventually snowball away from you. Sometimes you're just not going to have it. And I think, they played really well in Toronto. Some of the habits and turnovers that cost you in the Montreal game, you try to correct them, but sometimes it snowballs the rest of the way. You had a couple guys that just didn't have really good games defensively. Honestly, I think that I really think Ottawa did such a good job, scouting the Blues, knowing what they were going to do, that they were in a lot of the lanes, and the Blues just didn't really adjust as that game went along. And so a lot of knockdown pucks, a lot of turnovers, a lot of giveaways that were creating 2-on-1s and a couple of breakaways, and they were in the back of the net just about every single time. So I think there was a renewed focus. I just walked out of the skate that they just had here in Philadelphia, and it was a crisp one, a fast one, an intense one. There's a lot of talking between players and coaches, one-on-ones, a lot of coaching going on the ice as well. Put that all together, and it was a pretty intense practice.
Kerbs, Bannister mentioned to you yesterday on the coaches show that right now, to avoid getting down by these goals early on, the Blues need to find a way to start converting on their chances. And then we saw 3 turnovers that took place in the offensive zone last night. Are we seeing this offense press a little too hard to try and convert on these chances?
No, I actually think you're seeing that, guys – this is still, when we talk about a team in transition, we literally might be talking about transition, right? You see guys trying to go east-west at the blue lines with a move or two instead of just chip it in and then go a hard work with speed. And what was missing in these last couple games, guys, I think is something that you call predictability. And when they talk about predictability to your teammates, they're talking about your teammates know what you are going to do in situations, so the reads are the same, right? And so they know, okay, he got the puck there. He's going to chip it in. I've got to get in with speed and get over here. And when that doesn't happen, one guy who might actually be in the absolute right spot of where he's supposed to be actually looks like he's way out of the play and something isn't right. I don't think there's a whole lot of predictability in the team's game right now, and moving up the ice as a unit of 5, things like that. And I think they worked on that a lot kind of in practice today. There's to what you're talking about, Alex, too much east-west and just not enough get in on the forecheck and go work the puck.
Curbs, when we look back on this 3, 4, 5 weeks from now, what will we be saying? The team that we saw over that stretch of time more closely resembled the team that we saw against Toronto, or the team that we saw over the last 2 games against Montreal and Ottawa?
No, I think the team that you'll end up seeing is one that's a little bit closer to the team that you saw in Toronto. And that's not hope, because they know they can play that way. The team's dealing with a little bit of adversity now with some injuries and nicked up. There's a ton of ice packs on guys right now, but there's a desire by, a good group. But what has to happen, BK, to me is this is one of those moments where the players have to grab the team from the coach. And that's obviously not knocking the coach, but this is one of those where the players have to look at each other and say, hey, this is the way it's going to be to win. And if we keep resisting, or certain players don't want to do it, the players are the ones that have to bring them in line. There's only so many coaches. There's so many times that a coach can talk to a player. An assistant GM can talk to a player. A GM can talk to a player. A scout can talk to a player. There's only so many times. At some point, it's got to be a player in the locker room, grabbing a guy, and saying, hey, look, this is what we need, and this is the way it's got to be. And so I do think that getting that consistency will lead to more games like Toronto than you saw than games versus Montreal and Ottawa.
Chris Kerber is the voice of the Blues. You'll hear him on the call tomorrow night. Blues versus the Flyers right here on 101 ESPN. Pregame with Alex starts at 5. Puck drop with Kerbs tomorrow night at 6. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. Safe travels. We'll talk with you again soon.
All right, guys. Thanks. Yeah, sorry for kind of the wonky travel schedule on the road, but sometimes things adjust. So great job adjusting with us, and we will talk to you guys when we're back home on Saturday.
Don't sweat it at all. Appreciate the time as always, my man. Anytime with Chris Kerber is worth it, and we had that right here on 101 ESPN via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Always enjoy being able to catch up with Chris Kerber. If you missed our conversation with him, be sure to check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Alex, I understand where Kerbs is coming from on he thinks that the team is going to be closer to the team that we saw against Toronto than the one that we saw over the last couple. And I also find it interesting that he said, hey, this is a group that has to come together. They've got to be able to take this away, and it's on the players eventually. Who's the one that's doing that, though? It's Neighbors and Holloway and Schenn?
Well, who it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be Schenn, Buchnevich, Kyrou, Falk, Parayko. Those are the guys that are supposed to be doing it. Yeah. The problem is right now it's Neighbors, it's Holloway, it's Broberg. It's these guys that haven't been a part of this team very long. And that's kind of where the problem lies right now.
Like Broberg, I don't know. This is no shot, I promise you. Is he a leader on the team?
Well, none of these guys are in a position where they can be a leader. Like, you're 23 years old, you were just offer sheeted, you're on a new squad, you can't be a leader.
And Neighbors is the rarity.
Neighbors
that guy
should be.
Immediately came in and was like, oh, that guy's future captain. Mm-hmm. Everybody sees it. It's not hard to see. That guy's going to be a captain at some point in his career. But that's the exception, not the rule. Yeah. Most of the time, these guys come in and they're just trying to figure out what the hell is happening to them because you're drinking out of a fire hose.
That's why Matthew Joseph is so pivotal, because Matthew Joseph was one of those guys that did come in, and at least he didn't become a vocal leader where he's getting in people's faces, but he brought a lightened sense of... He brought the ability to get away from the toughness when things go bad. And that's why I think you saw the team rebound pretty well to where they've always been in these games, even despite them not looking good for a period. You lost that guy. How do you overcome that? You hope he's available to you. I'll tell you, not to make a game seem bigger than it should be, but Philadelphia's going to tell you a lot. You've been in one other 2-game losing streak, and you rebounded from that by winning back-to-back games on home ice, and you looked good in both of them. You just lost to a team that had lost back-to-back games, or their coach called them out, Marty St. Louis, and then you lost to another team that had lost back-to-back games that their goaltender called them out, and they went out there and they put on a show. If you go out and you get beat up by Philadelphia once again, you know that this team is, to what Brayden Schenn said, soft. If you're able to respond in this Philly game and come out with a better 60-minute performance, that's going to give you okay, this team identified what the problems are, they're able to fix it. Now it's just a matter of consistency.
Yeah, it's hard to make heads or tails over where they're at right now. I really liked what we had seen from them up until the Toronto game, and between the injuries and the overall lack of effectiveness over the last two, it's just not an easy product right now to buy into.
It just really sucks, and Grant and I were talking about this last night.
And I don't want to make too much over 2 games.
No, it really sucks that this is the year that the injury bug kicks in. Mm-hmm. Because last year when your team had no chance and you knew things were bad, that was the year that you would have liked to see injury. And last year was probably one of their best seasons in terms of limited man games lost that they had in almost 15 years. And now you're talking about losing 2 already impactful players. It's tough because you felt like the team was at least progressing, and now that stunts everything because you can't judge the power play. You can't judge the penalty kill. You can't judge 5-on-5 when you're losing some of these guys.
The Air Comfort Service X line is 314-399-9646. Somebody from the 980 says, one guy should not make your team look this bad. If you lose him, if he's not playing and your team looks this bad, it's because your roster is not as good or great as people think that it is. I think the thing is people don't think that this roster is great. And if people do think that the roster is great, I don't know really what to tell you, honestly. The organization has been very clear about where the team is at right now. They're going through a rebuild, retool, whatever. And this is...
I also disagree with that, though. Like, some circumstance, yeah, absolutely. But Edmonton's out without Connor McDavid for the next 3 weeks. I mean, one player can change the entire look of your team. If you pluck Cale Makar off the Colorado Avalanche right now, that team is a disaster.
But maybe not, because they've still got a bunch of other stars on that roster, and they're in a win-now mode where they're trying to win a cup. If you pluck one guy out of the Dodgers lineup, hey, they've still got Shohei Ohtani. Like, Freddie Freeman missed a game. Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts are still there. If you pluck a guy out of that Vegas top line, they've still got one of Stone or Eichel. That's a pretty good place to be, right? You pluck one of those guys off of their blue line, they've still got 17 other oak trees back there. If you pluck somebody that is a star out of the Blues lineup right now, they just don't have the replacements ready to go. They don't have the infrastructure to be able to overcome that kind of a loss. They're not at that point in their trajectory, and that's okay. And the reason why I view it as being okay, and I know there's some people that are like, BK, you're okay with losing. Yeah, I am right now. Just be totally candid, I am. The reason why is because the Blues organization has told you that that's not what this season is about. The season is about grooming the young guys and building your core group of players. It's not about going all in for a cup this year. This team ain't winning the cup. We all know it. This team probably isn't making the postseason. I would bet against it, and they bet against it before the season. They'd like to. In an ideal world, they would go on a crazy run. But that's not what the season was always about. The Cardinals next year, it's not about making it to the postseason. It's about building for the future. So am I accepting of the losing? I am. Certainly a lot more so than I have been in the past, because that's not what the Blues organization has been building towards. Not for this year.
Yeah, I agree with you there that this is where you're at, and we're going to get into this in a couple of segments, but this team also is in a position to where they're going to have to look at their roster, and the young players are the guys that are having success right now. So, like, I can't look at them and be like, oh, well, this is a year to grow your young players. Holloway's looked awesome. Neighbors looks awesome.
Absolutely.
Bolduc's looked pretty good. Broberg looks pretty good.
But for young players, they look pretty good relative to what the expectations were. They don't look good relative to Stone or Eichel
of course
or
not.
Barbashev.
They're trending in the direction. The problem for your team is you've got your defense is outscoring your top 3 players right now. So, like, this is a season that you should be in the playoffs, I believe, because you got to get a taste of that at some point. And Doug Armstrong even said at the start of training camp that we've given this team the pieces that they need to compete. Now the expectation is to fight for a playoff spot. At some point, you're going to have to look at this and say, hey, all of the young guys are starting to trend in the right direction, but the guys that are supposed to be leading this team out of the battle or into the battle and out of the retool, they're not doing it.
The 980 says, you guys definitely thought this was a good roster because you were high on it up until Game 6, so don't act like you weren't. Keep that same energy. I was excited about the style of play. I liked watching them play hockey. Over the last couple, I haven't seen that same style of hockey from the Blues. And really, last night was the game where you really didn't see it at all. Against the Canadiens, a little different, but this one was bad last night. So for me, when I say I'm excited about where the Blues are at, it's mostly because of what it can mean for the future. Let's be clear about that right now. I'm not saying that they're going to go out there and have a 100-point season. I don't believe that at all. I never have.
None of us believed that, by the way. I said 94.
Alex is the highest on this
I said 94 points, which is what they were last year.
There's a dividing line in this studio.
Yeah.
Where it's me and T-Bone on one side and Alex on another.
Yeah, but BK kind of does like jump rope. It's like, no, maybe.
I don't, though. I like watching this team much more than I did last year. And I think they're probably going to be like on the cusp of a playoff spot, but this Thomas injury changes things. The Joseph injury, depending on what the update is, that changes things for me. I think they're going to be on the negative side of a playoff spot. but I think they're going to be more competitive than they were last year. I think they're going to have young players that step up in meaningful roles, and we've already seen that so far this year. I think they're just going to be more fun to watch, just a more watchable product. They play a style of hockey most of the time that I think fans prefer to see. So that's where I'm at on this team, just from the 10,000-foot view. But each individual game, because of who we are, because of what we do for a living, we're going to break that individual game down. Last night sucked. Like, there's no way to put lipstick on that pig. That was gross.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm still high on this team, and I'm not going to sway away because of an ugly game against Ottawa and a bad game against Montreal, is I go back to the interview you guys did with Hitch when you're talking about where your team's at and how successful they can be. They've got the goaltending. You've now got a guy who could be a top pair defenseman, a number one defenseman, and you've got a centerman who's injured right now. You've got the pieces to compete right now. Yes, you're dealing with injuries. I'm not going to make an excuse, but I think this roster is better on paper as they go. It's just 10 games into the season.
And that's where me and Alex we go down to the dividing line. Like, we've got the divider in the studio, Alex on one side, me and T-Bone are on the other.
Coming up, the Cardinals have a chance to have 100 points this season.
Here on 101 ESPN. I don't think they use points.
They don't.
In baseball. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Victory Men's Health. It is time to unlock your inner champion. The way to do so is with Victory Men's Health. VictoryMen'sHealth.com is the easiest place to go learn more about what they can do for you, whether it's weight loss goals that you're trying to meet, low testosterone issues. Do you wake up in the morning, have less energy than you once did? You don't get the same results out of your workouts over the course of the day? Well, they can help you out potentially over at Victory Men's Health. Erectile dysfunction issues, they've got some answers for that. Go over to VictoryMen'sHealth.com, click on the top right tab on the page, book now, put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them a little bit about yourself, what you're dealing with, what you're trying to do to unlock your inner champion. Tell them BK from 101 ESPN sent you, and they will get right back with you. Book that first appointment for you. The process couldn't be any easier. Looks a little bit different for everybody, but the process is the same. By booking that first appointment, when you walk through the door, you're going to be greeted by just a state-of-the-art facility. It's absolutely stunning when you walk through the door. The people there that are going to help you are the best at customer service in the business. It's going to be an enjoyable process for you. It's not like walking into one of those dimly lit hospital rooms that some of these other places have become. Victory Men's Health and VictoryMen'sHealth.com. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, I feel like we're in a club right now.
And this right here, ladies and gentlemen, is why I would never be in a club with Brandon.
Add another
We'd
divide.
have a good time together, though.
I don't think so, man.
Our wives would hang out. We'd be over there just,
I don't think so, man.
horrible.
I was going to say we wouldn't be over there going,
You did not
I
tune in to
do.
TMA. This is indeed BK and Ferrario.
yes. Jump on in.
Not going to that club with
I
you
could
guys.
promise you after seeing BK at his wedding where he was like, my song! We would not be doing that.
Alex, question
Well, I
for
was
you.
having an important conversation with him.
T-Bone, please don't answer this question. Has Tanner ever entered a club before?
No.
Tanner, go ahead and answer. Have you ever?
Hold on. Are we talking like a nightclub with like music and a DJ and a dance floor? Because there are some clubs I say, yes, he's been into.
Yeah, okay.
But if we're talking a nightclub, absolutely
Not a gentleman's club, but a
No.
nightclub.
Gentleman clubs he's been into, I know.
Yeah, no, I've never been to a
Yeah,
nightclub.
okay.
I had a feeling. I was
I'm
just
not gonna
checking.
lie.
Has
I
Alex
like
ever
that.
been into a nightclub?
I would
No
say
shot.
yes.
Yeah, I've been into multiple ones.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
See, not my cup of tea. Like, I like hanging
We
out,
went to
doing some fun
college in
things.
like cities.
Yeah, I went to,
We went to colleges that the biggest highlight wasn't a Walmart.
yeah, I'm trying to think
Or
what the
a
biggest
soda
highlight
shop.
was at my, no, that was my
I mean,
hometown.
you were in Alton-ish, right?
Yeah,
college.
Godfrey, I was just like right past Alton. Yeah. Yeah, there's no.
I feel like Alton is more of a like
Laid back.
bars, and it's not necessarily
I
a
would,
nightclub vibe.
That's more my thing. Is like go to a bar, get some drinks, hang out, watch some sports. The whole like nightclub where you can't hear yourself think.
That's exactly why I haven't gone back for a while.
Not my
Walking in, like, I can't even talk to people.
I got to like 27, and that life wasn't for me anymore.
I got that at that point. Like
Got to 23.
when I was born.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the St. Louis Cardinals. Please never do that again. And now I'm thinking about what I did, and I apologize. I'm doing this.
I may need to go scrub our YouTube page.
This was even more high pitched, too. It's like, Okay, let's go.
So Katie had a great piece
Baseball.
over at The Athletic earlier today talking about what the Cardinals are going to do this offseason. A lot of it, you guys know, right? They're taking a step back to try to go forward. But there was an interesting piece of this story that I think is worth discussing for a bit, okay? The Cardinals have 5 days after the conclusion of the World Series, so this could be literally, they have 5 days after today, to exercise their club options on Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, or Keenan Middleton. St. Louis is not expected to exercise that option on Lance Lynn or Keenan Middleton. Those are worth $17 million combined. However, according to Katie Wu, the Cardinals could bring back Kyle Gibson for $12 million, but doing so would almost guarantee that the clubs either trades Miles Mikolas or Steven Matz. The rationale for doing so would be twofold. The Cardinals expect payroll to decrease as they navigate their player development modernization, along with their lack of clarity regarding their future of the RSNs. That's the more important part. And TV revenue. That would make carrying 5 veterans in the rotation next year highly unlikely. Mozeliak is expected to trade the trademark or explore the trade market regarding many of the team's veterans, though the majority hold full no trade clauses, end quote. So there are at least conversations about bringing back Kyle Gibson. Alex, what do you think about that possibility?
I would do it in a heartbeat if you're telling me that you can move on from Miles Mikolas. And that's like my only stipulation on this. Like, I'm not bringing back Gibson unless I can move on from Miles Mikolas. Because if I bring back Kyle Gibson, to me, that is Miles Mikolas 2.0. Now, I know Gibson's got a little bit better swing and miss stuff. Mikolas has pitched to contact. I understand that. Both probably are number 3s for you. Should be number 3s for you in a, like, realistic rotation. And you're bringing back the same type of player. But Gibson is going to be cheaper and not as long-term committed than where you're at with Miles Mikolas. I look at their rotation and I say you've got one or the other. Because in my eyes, they're going to be moving on from Sonny Gray. You're not bringing back Lance Lynn. I don't know with Fedde. I don't know with Steven Matz, although Matz is probably a bullpen pitcher. You've got one or the other so that you can give the rest of that rotation to younger players in your system. If you bring both back in Mikolas and Gibson and have Matz, if he's a part of your rotation, now you've got limited space for your younger players. So one or the other, that's how this is going to go in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't mind bringing back Kyle Gibson because, one, he does kind of put you in a spot where you need to trade one of those guys, which is probably best for the organization. But, like, let's say you bring him back. Let's say you can't move on from Mikolas. I don't care if you have both those guys in your rotation. I think you're going to need somebody to eat some innings in this rotation, especially if you're a team that's going to be taking a step back. You're going to have two kids in the rotation in Palante and McGreevy. If we're being honest, they're probably going to go through some more ups and downs this year than we saw from them last year. So you've got those two guys. Let's just assume they have Matt. You know he's going to be hurt at some point, so he's not the guy that's going to provide innings for you. And if you trade Sonny Gray, maybe you trade an Eric Fetty. Well, now I do need one of those guys at a minimum, if not two, just to make me feel more comfortable. And it buys you time until you potentially get some more reinforcements when you see Quinn Matthews at some point. And if Kyle Gibson pitches like he did last year, you can trade Kyle Gibson at the trade deadline. He's going to carry some value for a contender that looks at it and says, hey, we need an upgrade at our 4 spot. Let's bring in Kyle Gibson and trade for him. So there's no downside for me in this move. I like the idea that they're exploring it, but it does mean you are going to have to trade one of Steven Matz or Miles Michaelis. To me, it doesn't matter. You just got to move some of that money.
All right, let's go down this route. If I told you out of these 5, you could keep 2 this offseason, take into account, because this is going to be an important part of the discussion, the money that they're owed, what they could potentially get via trade, and that means taking into account no trade clauses because you have less leverage if they have a no trade clause. So that's why Nolan Arenado ended up getting less in return for the Dodgers. Of these 5, if you had to keep 2, or let's say 2 of them, who are you keeping? Sonny Gray, Miles Michaelis, Kyle Gibson, Steven Matz, Eric Fetty.
So money aside.
You keep 2. No, we'll take into account money because I'm talking like you're.
So we're doing this like as
3.
the Cardinals, where I'm trying to slash payroll and I'm trying to keep this team somewhat decent.
If I'm in John, let me clarify. If I'm in John Mozeliak's shoes, I'm taking into account who's the guy that I'm going to get the most in return for. Like Eric Fetty to me is a guy that I'm going to get a lot in return for. So I'm going to probably trade that guy, even though that means making my team worse. Like I think Eric Fetty is a better pitcher. If I could have 1 for 1, if I'm trying to compete next year, I'd rather have Fetty than Michaelis. Yeah. But I'm going to get less in return from Michaelis than I would for Eric Fetty. So I'm taking that into account. I'm trading Eric Fetty. Sonny Gray, I think you could get a lot in return for him, despite the no trade clause, because I think there's potentially a couple of teams that he'd be willing to go to that would also be interested in him. Boom, there's how you get your bidding war for him. And then for me, I would probably try to trade one of Michaelis or Steven Matz as well, and it would probably be Matz for me. I think a team would take him on his current contract because it's not crazy. So that means keeping Gibson and Michaelis. I don't love that for their rotation next year, but I'm maximizing the return and also offloading a good amount of money in the process. So I've got Michaelis, Gibson, Palante, McGreevy as my top 4 in my rotation next year. That's not good, but I'm getting returns back for those guys. I'm saving a boatload of money, and I'm getting prospects in return for some of those pitchers that I traded. So for me, Michaelis and Gibson would be the 2 that I would keep.
I would go Gibson and Matz, and I would move Michaelis. And I know that rotation doesn't look pretty right now, but frankly, I don't care because this team's
trading Fetty and
I'm trading
Sonny
Fetty and Sonny Gray. Those are givens for me. Like I would consider Fetty if the return's not what I deem it to be, because like that would be a good thing to at least get you through for a year. But you're right, in terms of return, you're probably going to get the best for an Eric Fetty. I would go with Gibson and Matz, and I know Matz is going to be hurt, but that's kind of my point. I'm giving this open-ended to my younger players and saying, here you go. This team, you could call it a refresh, whatever you want. I think this team is going to be bad next season. I think they're entering somewhat of a rebuild or retool. And to do that, open it up for your younger players to let them taste Major League Baseball.
I would do what you did, BK. I would keep Gibson and Michaelis of those 5 because, one, I think you're getting better return from Gray and Fetty. And I think when it comes to Matz, to me, like if you're going to trade Michaelis, one, you got to deal with the no trade, which could be hard. I don't know if it will be, but it could be. And you're probably got to eat like $7 to $10 million on that deal. You probably got to get him around the Matz dollar figure, if not a little bit below. So I have to either eat $10 million, say $7 million for him, or maybe like $2 million to move the Steven Matz deal, if any at all. And I don't have to worry about a no trade. I would trade Steven Matz. And now when you look at that rotation, I mean, you read all 4 guys there. Who's eating innings for you? And if you get rid of Michaelis, you don't really have anybody that's eating innings. And I think that's the other part, too, is not only are you trying to maximize your return while also trying to shed payroll, you also got to keep it to where you're not hurting any of the young guys as well. And what I mean by that is like forcing yourself to say, oh, well, now we have to call up a Gordon Graceffo or a Quinn Matthews before he's ready. No, when I've got innings eaters like a Michaelis and a Gibson in a rebuild, that's a good thing. Correct. And now for that 5th starter spot, you can either have an open competition. Maybe you look at what Zach Thompson provides in camp. But now I'm probably going out to the free agent market and signing somebody to a 1-year, like $10 million deal, maybe even less than that, and see if I can get a reclamation project that I could potentially bring in on a 1-year deal to fill out that 5th spot.
Might even be a Shane Bieber, who's going to be here in July, right? Like you go first 3 months of the season, we'll try out some of these young guys, see if there's anything that ends up sticking. It could be where one guy gets 3 starts, and then you go with another guy that gets 3 starts, and then another one, and so on and so forth. And then July, you get him back. You get Shane Bieber, who you insert into your lineup. You have him on a 1-year deal, so that way he can walk. So that way, hopefully, he boosts his market. Works out for both sides. Go your merry way. If he's great, hey, by the deadline, he might be traded somewhere else to a legitimate contender. That's the kind of thing that you could do with something like him, similar to what Fedde did last year, honestly, with the White Sox. I think it could make some sense to go that route. Somebody on the text line asked a question that kind of goes along with what you just said, T-Bone, from the 314. Why not get rid of all of them? Serious question. The reason why, for me, I would want at least 2 of these veterans to be around is because it puts less strain on your bullpen. Because some of the guys that are currently in your bullpen will probably still be around whenever you do end up getting good again. Because I don't think this is going to be a 5-year process for the Cardinals. There shouldn't be, at least. And if that's the case, well, I don't want to break those guys this upcoming season. It makes it very difficult to evaluate everything else around you if you don't have a couple of guys that you can count on going out there for 25-plus starts. And I want adults in the room. So I want Michaelis or Gibson or Fedde or Sonny, a couple of those guys to be there to help along Pallante and McGreevy as they get their head beat in a couple of times this year, which will happen. There will be starts next season where McGreevy goes out there, gives you 3 innings and 7 earned runs allowed. How's he going to respond to that? Well, you've got a pitching coach that's there for him, but I also want another guy that's been there, done that, had that experience, who can help him along. So that's what the role will be for Michaelis and Gibson. Eat innings, make starts, help along the young guys. And I think for sure at least Gibson, and I think some of these other guys as well, would be more than happy to take on that role. So that's why you keep them around, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we heard talks about how Gibson was a guy that was a great leader in the locker room already this year. I think he knows where he's at his point in his career, and that is, hey, I'm being brought in as a number 4, number 5 starter, whether that's for a contender or not a contender. My role is going to be on the leadership side, especially with the St. Louis Cardinals. The other thing, too, when you trade some of these guys, what you could also get is, because like right now, 4 starters, maybe they don't go out to free agency. Maybe you get a back-end guy that comes into one of these deals. Like maybe in the Sonny Gray trade, you acquire when we talked about Clark Schmidt 2 years ago.
Perfect, yeah.
Maybe there's one of those guys in one of these deals. So now I've got the 5-man rotation. Maybe I go out and sign Shane Bieber. That way I've got a 5-man rotation until he's ready to come back. And now you're starting to operate like, what's that thing they hadn't been doing lately? Oh, as a modern organization.
It's also possible you get that in like a Nolan Arenado trade or a Wilson Contreras trade. Like, there's other ways that you can go about this where it's not just the moves that you do with your pitching, it's also what you do on the position player side of things as well. I think this could be a really compelling offseason for the Cardinals, just not in the way that we've seen it be in recent years. It's about what is the return for the future, not what is the return for right now. He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, the pressure is on the highest paid players on the Blues right now, and they don't seem to be responding. Alex has some interesting numbers and a perspective on it that we'll talk about next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Ted Drew's off of Chippewa, the famous destination that has been serving St. Louisans that famous frozen custard since 1929. All about family-owned tradition. They've been family-owned and operated with 95 years and 4 generations of families serving that frozen custard. Incredibly delicious. It's rich. It's creamy texture. Perfected recipe. Premium ingredients. And best part about it is you get there, you can mix and match whatever your heart desires with all of the flavors that Ted Drew's offers. You can get it in concretes, malt, shakes, sundaes, floats, even buy it in the quart size and bring it home with all the holidays that are going to be coming up. It's a perfect dish to bring out for dessert late into the evening. Like I mentioned, you've got tons of different recipes and tons of different flavors that you can mix and match with. And while you're out there, make sure you walk across the parking lot and check out their gift shop, Ted Drew's Gift Shop. It's got tons of Ted Drew's apparel. It's got souvenirs. It's got gift cards. Everything you need that says Ted Drew's in St. Louis is there for your purchase. So go on out there, check them out today, check them out this weekend, start those family traditions, those traditions with your friends at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. Ted Drew's, it really is good, guys and gals.
Tanner Hendrickson here at the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues fell to the Senators last night 8-1. They are back in action tomorrow night as they visit the Philadelphia Flyers to wrap up their road trip. Well, pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 6 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, Game 5 of the World Series as the Dodgers look to close out the Yankees in New York. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Jordan Kyrou is once again under fire here in St. Louis with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Alex, Jordan Kyrou has not done a whole lot of goal scoring this year. He only has 2 so far on the season. He is being paid $8 million per year. He has not scored since the first game of the season, a game in which he did have 2 goals. That being said, I'm not pointing the finger at him necessarily. He's first on the team in points. I know, not enough goals. I'm with you guys, but he's played a more well-rounded game this year. He's one of just 5 players on the team that is a net positive on the season. He is a +2 overall so far this year, despite playing almost 19 minutes a night. So he's on the ice more often. He has been bumped up back to that top line once again. And I think his all-around game has been much better. Didn't have a good game last night, but nobody on the team had a good game last night. I think Kyrou has mostly been okay this year. Yes, even relative to his $8 million contract, despite the lack of goal scoring. I think Pavel Buchnevich, it's hard to point at him as the problem for this team right now when he's playing a position that he is clearly not best suited to play in. Alex, to me, if we're going to point fingers at specific guys so far this year that have not lived up to our own expectations, and I want to hear who you would do for this, I would go, and I don't say this with any sort of malice, I don't like doing this, but I would go with Brayden Schenn. Brayden Schenn is the captain of the team. He is one of my favorite players on the team because of who he is as a guy and what he has meant to the organization since being traded here. It was a great move by the Blues at the time, and I would have done the contract the same way that the Blues did. I didn't think it was going to be something that aged poorly. But over the last 3 years now, this is not a one-off. This is now a few seasons for Brayden Schenn where the play has dropped off. He's a -54 since the start of the 2022 season. He has some of the worst on-ice numbers for the Blues so far this year of any non-fourth-line player. He has 1 goal and is a -5 when he's on the ice so far this year. To me, that's just not good enough. I was hopeful that he could be a top six center for you, and he looks like a third-line player right now, and potentially even a fourth-line player. Alex, what do you make of the top players on the Blues team so far this year and their lack of production?
Yeah, I'm with you on Schenn. I was optimistic on him. I thought he was going to be better than what he was last year because last year was a lot, and it has not been that since right now. He's basically been a third-line center for you, which is why you're in this position where you're looking for a second-line center, and now you've had to move him up because of Robert Thomas's injury. I don't know why it's not working for Brayden Schenn. I can't use the line combinations because last time he was successful, he played with Brandon Saad and he played with Jordan Kyrou. Last season, he was successful with Jake Neighbors and Brandon Saad. So the line he's with right now is what worked last year for the Blues, and it's just not working right now. So I don't point at one player and say, like, this is why things have gone haywire in these last couple of games. I look at your top players overall. Bad math by me. I said earlier that your defense has scored the same amount of goals as your top 3 players in Schenn, Kyrou, and Buch. They've scored 1 more than you. But those 3 guys have not scored a goal since the first 3 games of the season. You had 2 from Jordan Kyrou in that first game. Pavel Buchnevich scored against Vegas. Brayden Schenn got that goal against the San Jose Sharks. You can't go 7, 8, 9 games without your players that are logging 18, 19, 20 minutes a night without touching the scoreboard. And I know that there are some that are like, yeah, but they're generating offense. Generating offense is fine, but you're not converting on it. We're talking about a team that offensively has struggled to find the back of the net. And the bigger picture thing for me, which I find fascinating, I go back to Doug Armstrong's comment at the start of training camp, and I sound like a broken record, but he talked about how he said we've given this team everything that they need to compete, and now it's a matter of can you compete. But the part that I perked my ears up to was when he said, and if things don't go well or if they do go well, we'll address at the trade deadline accordingly. We've also spent time talking about the retool and saying, like, yeah, but, you got to get some of these younger guys acclimated to the NHL. Bolduc will continue to grow. Neighbors will continue to grow. You've got Dylan Holloway, who's 23 years old. Well, Dylan Holloway and Jake Neighbors are combined for the most goals on this team right now at 4 apiece. Now, Holloway has scored 2 power play goals. Jake Neighbors has scored the majority of even strength goals for you. And yet we're sitting here saying, yeah, but Kyrou hasn't scored since the Seattle Kraken game. Yeah, but Pavel Buchnevich hasn't scored against the Vegas Golden Knights. This team's in an interesting spot to where at the end of the year, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but you can't sit here and keep saying, well, the younger guys are going to get acclimated, because this is the season that your best players, again, go back to listen to Doug Armstrong at the beginning of the season, listen to Pavel Buchnevich in the piece that he wrote, or that JR wrote, your best players have to be your best players. And in a game, 2 games where you lose Robert Thomas and then Matthew Joseph, Kyra's been a -4. Pavel Buchnevich has been a -4. Brayden Schenn has been a -2. And you've had 0 points from them.
Kind of speaks to the fact that Kyrou's had a good season, though, that he's still a plus on the ice, and he's been a -4 over the last 2 games.
Yeah, he was a +4 in those first 3 games, and he's been a -2 since then.
I don't think that's right. But Kyrou's overall been a net positive on the ice for you so far this year.
Yeah, he was +4 after the Seattle San Jose Sharks game in Vegas Golden Knights, and he's been a -2 since then.
Okay. But most of that like we're doing the fun with math thing where like you take out the first 3 games and I can take out the last 2.
Right, but what I'm saying is your best players were your best players in the first 3 games, and they have been non-existent for you from then on.
Kind of, but I know nobody likes assist numbers because they don't matter, but assists mean you had a goal that was scored and they contributed towards it. And so far this year, Jordan Kyrou leads the team in points because of those assists that he's been able to put up so far this year. So, like, I think it's a little unfair what we're doing with Kyrou, and it happens every year, and I'm just going to be on an island over here, and I understand that. I've got to be the guy that defends Kyrou.
There because Kyrou played well in that Maple Leafs game. We all came on the air the next day and said, like, dude, Kyrou was awesome in that game.
That wasn't a new thing. Kyrou's been playing that way for most of the season, and his play has dipped the last 2 games, no doubt. But I find it difficult to blame him when the entire team looked disinterested in playing hockey last night.
No, and again, I said it at the beginning of this. I'm not just blaming one player. I'm blaming all of your top players. But it was kind of a one-off with Jordan Kyrou. Just like it's been
for him playing well
against the Maple Leafs.
He was
bad against Montreal, and he was bad against Ottawa.
Yeah, the last 2 games, I acknowledge.
But prior to that, he was bad against the Winnipeg Jets. He was bad against the Minnesota Wild game.
Just based on plus minus, or based on
based off the play?
Oh, I didn't feel that way at all. I think Jordan Kyrou has mostly this year played in a way that, like,
but again, I'm not
team inspired. He's doing more of the back checking, like all the stuff that we get on him about. He's doing all those things, and this is what I said at the beginning of the season. He can do all of those things. And ultimately, you get to the end of the year, if he doesn't have 35 goals, we're still going to get on him.
Yeah.
Because that's what we care about. We care about the goal scoring. But when he does the goal scoring, we get on him about the other stuff. So I don't know that Jordan Kyrou can win here.
But again, I'm going to make myself clear once again. This isn't just Jordan Kyrou. Pavel Buchnevich has been a one-off. You had a really good game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, much like Jordan Kyrou did. And you had a bad game against Montreal and Ottawa and the Winnipeg Jets, the Minnesota Wild. Like,
I can at least explain that one, though, pretty easily. He's not playing his position.
Sure, you can explain that. But unfortunately for him, this is your position now. You've been told that it shouldn't, but you've been told you're there. And at some point, you got to be like, okay, well, I'm going to have to figure this out.
He's trying, but I can tell...
Your best players have had way too many one-offs, and I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. Your best players that are supposed to be consistent on a nightly basis are not consistent. The guys that are consistent for you are Jake Neighbors, Dylan Holloway, Matthew Joseph.
Yeah,
These are the
Neighbors
guys.
is a -4 this year.
Yeah.
So as much as we want to talk about the plus-minus for Kyrou or individual games where he's good, individual games where he's bad, he's a -4.
Yeah.
And like Pavel Buchnevich is playing the wrong position. He's a +4 on the ice this year. Jordan Kyrou a +2 on the ice this year. I love Jake Neighbors. This is not me talking down about what he is as a player, but I'm
not judging this off of plus minus. I'm judging this more off of the decisions that you're making on the ice.
Sure, and I agree. Jake Neighbors last night, bad decision on the ice. Like, his decision led directly to a goal,
but we've seen that for all of these guys. Pavel Buchnevich did the same thing. Kyrou has done this. You're the players that are supposed to be leading you out of this retool are the ones that are still making the mistakes that you're picking out of the back of your net.
I think part of that is that they don't have centers right now, man.
I think part of it is they might have identified the wrong players to be the guys that are carrying you out of this.
Maybe. That's what this season needs to be about. He's Alex Esteban. I'm BK. Coming up next, The Rewind here on 101 ESPN. Sorry, we went long. I apologize. I yelled at Alex, told him how wrong he was about Jordan
Fighting with
Kyrou.
everybody
This is
today.
on me. So if you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
It's all love, Alex. I love you. I love T-Bone. I made both of you mad today. I apologize. I will be better tomorrow. Part of that is because we'll have Bill DeWitt, the third, on tomorrow. He's going to talk to
gonna make
us
him
about
cry
the
now.
business side of the Cardinals operation. We'll also talk to Joey Vitale, who always brightens things up here on BK and Ferrario. So for Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Fastlane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.